PGSQL. The morning fog clung to Blackwater Bay like an old shawl, dulling its waves to pewter. From the high deck of the captured Myrish galley Daenerys Targaryen inhaled the briny chill and tasted a hint of wood smoke drifting from the harbor. King's Landing slumbered beyond the fog, a sprawling silhouette of domes and rooflines limned in faint amber, oblivious for now that the last daughter of old Valyria had anchored less than 2 leagues from its walls. She kept her hands tented behind her back, resisting the urge to pace. The hour called for stillness. Movement betrayed unrest, unrest betrayed doubt, and doubt poisoned resolve before the first sword left its sheath. Grey Worm stood a pace behind, the ripple mark of scaled armor motionless in the half-light. He had given his counsel 2 nights ago, when the War Council debated whether to attack by sea or wait for the gates to open from within. "Bloodless victory ends no chains," he had said, voice flat but eyes fierce. "The Master's city burned and we freed millions." It was a truth he carried like a banner, yet the look he gave her afterward, unreadable as ever, had conceded another truth. This was not Meereen. To treat it so would invite a graveyard silence where bells once rang. A faint rush of wings, no louder than swans banking across a river, brushed the masts overhead. The fog parted as Drogon glided into view. Circles wide as castles, armored hide slicing air as easily as a sword through silk. His shadow danced over the white pennant stitched with the 3-headed dragon, and sailors flinched though they had seen him 100 times on the voyage west. Rhaegal banked wider still, dots of gold-green flickering beneath the cloud line, and little Viserion, now fully healed, beat after his brothers in playful pursuit. Their presence steadied Daenerys more surely than Maester Aemon's ghost ever had. They were living shards of home, proof that the blood of Valyria had not cooled. "Your Grace." Tyrion's soft call drifted from the gangplank. He had brought a cloak too large for his frame, black as Dornish wine, the silver hand brooch winking at his shoulder. Damp curls clung to his brow. "The lookout reports fires inside the city. Small ones, bakeries and hearths, but watchfires atop the sept as well. They prepare for sea. They always have." She murmured, gaze still fixed on the towers. How many stores remain after Euron's blockade shattered? Enough wheat for a month, perhaps. Not enough fresh water. Tyrion came alongside her, squinting at the veiled horizon. "Cersei never believed the Iron Fleet could be broken in an afternoon. She will ration her granaries now, but thirst prowls faster than hunger. Once we choke the river gates, the people will turn. And Cersei will blame me," Daenerys said, unbothered. The populace had lived under that yoke long before her sails were sighted. Fear breeds fire more surely than dragon flame. Tyrion rubbed the base of his brooch, a habit she noticed when thoughts ran ahead of words. "We may not need to starve them, Your Grace. Very sparrows whisper that resistance stirs among the gold cloaks. Janos Slint's young cousin commands the Mudgate Watch, an unimpressive boy who remembers his uncle's head on a pike. He would rather see a Targaryen on the throne than his own remain there. Fear cuts both ways." "Entehalam." A gull screeched above, swooping boldly toward Drogon's path before veering off with panicked flapping. Daenerys watched its tiny shape retreat toward the city spires. "Open the river chain tonight," she said at last. "Let the small folk see us sail past, unhindered. Let them see a promise of trade and food, not siege. Drogon will remain here, visible, but not unleashed. I want bells tomorrow, not smoke." "Nendepotter." Grey Worm's head tilted fractionally. He did not speak, yet she heard the word he withheld. Mercy. It was a bitter draught for men who had bled beneath whips and masters, hard to swallow now in Westeros, where no one yet called them masterless. But he trusted her, as did the unsullied and Dothrakian Selsails who had crossed half a world to follow that trust. She must reward it with victory that honored their pain. On Tyrion. Dusk spilled amber across the city as Tyrion guided Daenerys through the belly of the galley and into the cramped navigation alcove. A candle flickered over a vellum map of King's Landing pinned by bronze weights. Red wax lines circled the river gates, outer granaries beyond the dragon pit, and 3 towers along the northern wall. "These," he said, tapping each. "House Cersei's Scorpions. Qyburn's improved design, steel sinews, heavier bolts. 2 are fixed mounts, but one on the northern rampart rotates on an iron track. That one concerns me. No. Drogon burned 30 at Dragonstone. Grey Worm grunted, unmoved. Yes, when no one aimed them at his belly. Tyrion placed a miniature dragon carved from ivory near the rotatable scorpion. A lucky shot might cripple a wing. A luckier might pierce the heart. Why gamble when we can pluck its string before dawn? Daenerys traced a finger along a thin alley sketched from the Gate of the Gods to the Scorpion Tower. You plan for Unsullied to infiltrate? Too noticeable. Gold armor gleams even in moonlight. I propose a quieter hand. He reached into his cloak and produced a black leather bundle. Inside lay a rough-spun tunic sewn with patches of city grime, a tattered cloak the color of stone dust, and a dagger no longer than Tyrion's palm. Bronn awaits in the Fogwater winehouse. He has contacts among the Second Sons, still disgruntled that Cersei never paid them. For suitable coin they will scale a wall, slit a few throats, and sabotage winches. Daenerys frowned. Bronn the sellsword who threatened my dragons with a stolen scorpion. The very same. He threatens only where coin leads. My coin now. Tyrion's smile curled fox-like. He harbors no love for Cersei, and rather enjoys surviving, so he will not risk a half measure. She weighed the idea. Cuts from daggers, rather than fire, would certainly sober the city watch. Yet she sensed slippery steps upon that slope. If she refused flame but permitted murder in shadows, was her mercy true or only cosmetic? The question lingered in her bones like old winter chill, older than dragons. Very well, she said finally. But tell Bronn, only the Scorpion crews. No bakers, no fishmongers, no children. If he cannot guarantee that, I will forbid it. Now wundernder. Tyrion's brow lifted in mild approval. I will relay it. He will listen, or I will ensure he never spends a copper again. He gathered the map while candle flames sputtered above, making city walls dance like living sinew. Grey Worm's hand brushed the hilt of his spear as they stepped back onto deck. Night fully descended, drawing a cloak of stars across the bay. Torches flickered along the battlements, fewer than usual for a city on war watch. Either Cersei overtrusted the chain, or lacked the men to guard every inch of parapet. Daenerys thought of Cersei alone in her tower, wine in hand, staring at the horizon as if daring her to strike. The memory of Missandei's execution still pulsed raw where it lodged in her heart. Yet grief demanded caution, not conflagration. She would not let the Lion Queen shape her into a butcher. Seven towers, east of the Mudgate, formed a crooked crown above the slums of Flea Bottom. At the stroke of midnight, a slender shape in mottled leathers slipped between shadow and torch glare, climbing knotted ropes hung from an abandoned sally hatch. Bronn moved like creek water, silent but never still, boots skimming mortar worn smooth by decades of rain. 2 former Second Sons followed, twin ghosts against moon-washed stone. A sentry's yawn drifted from above. Bronn froze beneath the lip of a crenelle. 1 heartbeat, 2, then steel flashed, a dull clink, and the sentry crumpled without time to gasp. They breached the Scorpion Tower in 7 minutes. Inside, gears towered taller than warhorses, half-assembled from spare pieces. Cersei's craftsmen still refining them. Bronn's men poured lamp oil onto hemp cables, stuffing rag between cogs. An arrow slit framed the bay. Torchlit masts bobbed like rows of candles, and beyond them, a black silhouette rode the sky. Wings outspread, eyes twin rubies. Even at distance, Drogon terrified. Bronn spat to the floor, then lit the rags. Flame licked oily rope. Tar scent filled the tower. They were gone before smoke curled. When dawn pinked the ramparts, 3 columns of gray haze rose where scorpions once stood guard. No bells rang, only frantic shouts as gold cloaks bucketed water. From her flagship, Daenerys watched the struggle through a spyglass. Satisfied, she lowered it and gave the order to weigh anchor. Oars churned, sails unfurled, catching a gentle northwesterly that carried them unopposed past the river chain, now dangling slack, its winch sabotaged in the night. Small folk lined the wharfs, garments patched and eyes hollow, but they did not scream. Many dropped to knees, crossing themselves at the sight of 3 dragons soaring overhead, though none breathed fire. Tyrion tossed barrels of fresh water into skiffs that followed the galley. Dothraki riders on the far bank herded sheep toward the common gates under white flags. Stories flew faster than arrows. Queen Daenerys brings water, not war. The Silver Queen feeds those the lioness left hungry. By mid-morning, every well at the fishmonger's square sported a new rope bucket, courtesy of unsullied quartermasters. Children with swollen bellies drank until they hiccuped. Bakers received sacks of grain. Healers, boxes of dried willow bark from Korth. Battered men in black doublets, the Night's Watch survivors who had followed Jon south, stepped through crowds distributing kindling and salted cod. Daenerys rode among them astride a silver mare, clothed in a simple riding dress dyed smoke blue. She spoke little, letting actions speak louder. But each bow, each whispered, "My queen," charged her like sunrise after a starless night. Cersei responded by hanging 3 dissenting gold cloaks from the city walls. Their bodies dangled above the river gate, turning slowly in hot breeze. Rage rippled through the streets, but also fear, and fear's favored sister, surrender. Sight of public death reminded them rule by lion's paw was rule by talon, uncaring of whose back bled beneath it. So when Tyrion bribed potshop owners to sound bells at midday, the clamor rolled like thunder. Low at first, then swelling until every tower echoed with the cry of bronze and iron. Daenerys sat her mare at the base of the ruined dragon pit steps. Staring up the hill to the Red Keep, she could almost feel the bells on the wind, each toll a plea. Drogon landed behind her, talons smashing flagstones that had been cracked since Maegor's reign. The dragon's neck arched, nostrils flaring at the scent of a city in turmoil. If she bade him, he would wreath the keep in living fire. Instead, she stroked obsidian scales where spear scars had long since healed. "Not today," she breathed. Footsteps, scuffed gravel. Jon Snow approached from a side path, cloak of pale wolf, fur dragging dust. She had asked him to remain behind, but Jon defied orders as naturally as breathing. He halted a sword's length away, eyes gray as dust, and searched her face. "The people call for you," he said. "They call for peace," she corrected. "They are the same when you answer." He shifted, glancing at Drogon, then back. "Cersei will not yield even now. Your army camp along the Blackwater grows each hour, yet she sits in her tower. How long can you wait?" Daenerys recalled the scent of wildfire, the shrieks, the echo of children burnt inside Meereen's temples, and Missandei's head tumbling from ramparts. Patience felt like chainmail draped across bare skin. Necessary yet cold, heavy. "I will wait until the city stands with me," she said. Jon's jaw tightened. "A day? A fortnight? Winter marches south behind us. Food rots, sickness spreads in camps, and dragonfire cures that." Her voice sharpened. "Do not ask me to burn them, Jon. You saw what the Lannisters' men do when frightened. They hide behind mothers, behind babes. The fire would consume innocence first. Then," he swallowed. "I'm not asking you to burn them, Daenerys. I ask only what comes if Cersei refuses terms even when her own streets ring for another queen." "Then," she said, "I go to her myself." Jon's eyes widened. "Into the keep, into her throne room, alone. I will show her what conquest without slaughter looks like. If she orders my death, she confirms her cruelty before every eye in Westeros. If she yields, we end this without a single torch raised. Either path crowns me. It crowns you, or costs you." Jon dragged fingers through his hair in frustration. "Cersei killed her own husband and burned the sept to cinders. She will not balk at murdering you beneath her roof. Then she can explain such murder to every corner of the realm that already prays for change." Daenerys met his gaze unblinking. Fear cannot hold a kingdom forever. Once broken, it resists. Jon looked away first, lips pressed white. I will go with you. No. She reached, squeezing his arm through leather. If I fall, the armies need you. They love you more than they love me, whether I wish it or not. Promise me you will continue. His breath trembled. I swore fealty. I will keep it. Then keep it now. Dada-ma. She released him and turned to Grey Worm, who had stood silent but listening. At dawn we approached the main gate under Parley Banner. Quarter my guard to 6. 6 is too few, Grey Worm objected. 6 is enough to carry word back should I die. More would show fear. No. Grey Worm's gaze flickered to John, perhaps hoping he would persuade her otherwise. John said nothing. Finally the commander dipped his head. It will be so. Aka. The red keep rose crimson and sharp-edged under a slate dawn. A lone peace banner, white silk stitched with the red-on-black sigil of House Targaryen, fluttered before the massive doors. Behind it marched Daenerys, cloak unadorned, only a narrow silver tiara marking royalty. 6 unsullied paced at her flanks, spears vertical. Grey Worm remained behind to command the encampment. Leaving him had been her final concession to caution. Gold cloaks lined the courtyard, but none made a move as she crossed cracked flagstones. Inside the echoing hall, a hush pressed upon every stone. The rustling of her skirts sounded like thunder. Great windows of stained glass cast slanted beams across the floor, shards of crimson and gold overlapping like war banners underfoot. She walked through the colors until she stood beneath the iron throne built by her ancestor. Cersei Lannister reclined upon it, golden hair pinned in a coiled crown style, black velvet gown hugging her form. A subtle bulge of motherhood no longer hid. Whispers of her pregnancy had circulated, though skeptics still doubted. Beside the throne stood Sir Gregor Clegane, monstrous and still, helm masking whatever humanity remained. Qyburn lurked near a pillar, parchment in hand. A dozen Lannister guards arrayed the dais. Daenerys inclined her head a fraction, just enough to acknowledge a rival sovereign, not enough to concede subservience. Queen Cersei, she said, voice level but clear, carrying off the marble. Your people toll the bells for peace. I stand before you to accept your surrender and guarantee the safety of your unborn child and your loyal retainers should you yield now. Cersei's smile was thin as a wire. Safety is fragile, your grace. You bring dragons, foreign soldiers, and traitors in your wake. And yet you speak of safety. My dragons have not burned a single home within your walls, Daenerys countered. Nor will they unless you force my hand. I learned in Slaver's Bay that a ruler must sometimes scourge the land to seed new growth. But I also learned who suffers first when rulers act with impatience. I will not repeat my own sins. Menpeler. Cersei's eyes flickered, a shadow of interest. You admit them? How quaint. Shall we compare lists? If your conscience keeps tally, the book would weigh more than the throne you sit on. Daenerys took a measured breath. I do not come to judge your past but to prevent more death. Bend the knee. Step aside. And you may keep your life in exile. Refuse and the city you claim to love will reject you. It has begun already. Daenerys. The queen rose. The iron throne's twisted blades caught her gown, but she pulled free. The city is mine. The people are mine. They eat because I let them. They breathe because I allow it. They'll starve before they call a foreign conqueror their mother. They drank water from my ships yesterday, Daenerys replied. They will remember which queen quenched their thirst. Cersei laughed softly. Water buys loyalty as long as water flows. When it dries, they'll turn back to the lion they know. She stepped closer to Clegane. Tell me, Dragon Queen, do you feel safe standing here with so little guard? I feel safe, Daenerys said, unsmiling, because I believe you have not entirely forgotten what children sound like when they scream. Silence cracked the room. Even Clegane shifted his weight. Cersei's face hardened to marble. I remember every sound, she whispered, and I will not hear them again. That is why I will not burn this city myself to thwart you. But do not mistake my restraint for surrender. I intend to fight in every alley, every attic, every vault. The city will fall stone by stone before I yield. Then, Daenerys' heart hammered, yet her voice stayed calm. Stannis vowed the same. His bones litter the snow. She let the words hang. Choose. Your child's first breath can be the dawn of a gentler reign, or its last breath amid rubble. Cersei glanced down, hand drifting to her abdomen. A gesture quick as lightning, yet betrayed by the eyes that softened briefly, almost imperceptibly. Then the hardness returned. "Leave my presence," she hissed. "Return tomorrow with your dragons unleashed, or not at all. I will not bow." Daenerys inclined her head, a fraction deeper than before, not in homage but pity. "Then may the mother have mercy." She turned and walked away, unsullied, forming a shell around her. None barred their path. Outside, dawn kindled peach light on red stone. She breathed in, tasting dust and salt, and climbed into her saddle. Drogon's silhouette wheeled high above. She did not order attack. Instead, she rode to the encampment, summoning Jon, Tyrion, Grey Worm, and Davos. Within her pavilion, she spoke plainly. Cersei refuses, but the city might not. Hold positions, continue food distribution, expand water lines. Send ravens south and west, promising clemency to houses who swear fealty before moon's turn. The council debated until noon, but her resolve held firm. She would starve Cersei of allies, not subjects. Unday, Paiche. On the fourth night, the wildfire stores beneath the great sept ignited. A jet of emerald burst skyward like a demon's plume. The roar flattened birds mid-flight. Shockwaves rattled panes half a league away. Daenerys stood on the riverbank and felt heat brush her face despite the distance. Bells clamored anew, but not for peace. They screamed alarm, panic, doom. Fires spread along vaulted tunnels, belching pallid flame that devoured wagons of grain Cersei had hoarded. Smoke turned the moon jaundiced. Tyrion arrived breathless, hair singed at the edges. "Sabotage," he spat, coughing. Qyburn's mummers mishandled transport barrels. The sept cellars held enough wildfire to roast a city block. Half the stash is aflame below the hill of Rhaenys. "Half?" Jon echoed, grim. "Half still sits beneath the keep," Tyrion answered. "If sparks reach those, we flood the tunnels," Daenerys said, voice steel. "Open the storm drains, divert the river. Grey Worm, dispatch unsullied in leather, no metal plates, they'll not cook alive. Davos, take every small boat upriver. Break the dams feeding the Black Cell cesspit. Tyrion, find me stone masons who know that warren. We drown this dragon before it wakes." Orders flew, men scattered. Drogon roared overhead, sensing maelstrom. Daenerys climbed a lookout tower to watch the city writhe in green glow. She felt Cersei's invisible hand behind the accident. A cornered lion would gladly burn her own den to slay intruders. But wildfire obeyed no queen. It rampaged wantonly. Even now, mothers hauled buckets beside sellswords. Fighting flame. Perhaps tonight, the city glimpsed tyranny stripped of regalia. Before dawn, the fires were smothered. River water, melted stone, and sacrifice purchasing survival. 50 soldiers, and twice as many citizens perished. Yet King's Landing still stood. Bells rang funeral dirges. The people's fury pivoted, less toward dragons unbreached outside walls, than toward the queen whose alchemists brewed hellfire beneath their beds. In every market tongues wagged. Lannister guards caught spitting children, cursing them lion spawn. Bread lines erupted in scuffles. Shouts of Dragon Queen replaced murmured hope with open chorus. Grey Worm reported that even highborn merchant guilds sent envoys asking terms for peaceful transition. The city slipped from Cersei's grasp like sand. On the 7th morning, the Iron Gate opened. A procession of gold cloaks marched out. Helms doffed, banners furled. Their captain, Janos Slynt's cousin, knelt before Daenerys, proffering the sword of his office across upturned palms. "The City Watch pledges loyalty to Queen Daenerys of House Targaryen," he declared. "We will not fight our own kin so the Mad King's daughter may be accused of the Mad Queen's crimes. We believe she is not mad but just." Daenerys accepted the sword and returned it. "Serve the people," she told him. And remember this mercy when next a ruler asks you to draw blades against them." That afternoon the bells told a new song. Surrender, not fear. One by one gates creaked wide, allowing unsullied patrols to relieve exhausted watchmen. Varys' birds whispered of riots in the Red Keep's lower barracks, kitchen servants wrestling guards for passage. Cersei barricaded herself in Maker's Holdfast with a dwindling handful of loyalists. Food supplies there would last a week at best. Another queen might have stormed the keep that night, end the game in a flash of steel. Daenerys chose a quieter assault. She dispatched Tyrion with parchment sealed by her signet, offering Cersei safe passage to Casterly Rock under escort. With her unborn child, if she abdicated by dawn's first light, she also sent a cask of Arbor Red, no poison, just a courtesy, acknowledging her enemy's tastes. Dawn came rosy and cool. No reply. At midday, a lone Lannister banner fluttered from a high window. White with crimson lion hung upside down, a symbol of distress. Grey Worm scouts reported mutiny. Lannister men barred Clegane from the corridors, refusing to die for a lost cause. Inside Maker's Holdfast screams rang, not of war but labor. Cersei birthed her child amid betraying walls. By evenfall, the gates of the Holdfast cracked open. Qyburn emerged, hands crimson, face ash. "A daughter," he told Daenerys, voice hoarse. "Cersei begs to see the sun before she relinquishes the crown." Daenerys nodded slowly. "Bring them." They met in the outer bailey under pale torchlight. Cersei, gaunt, hair clinging to sweat, clutched a swaddled infant. She looked half a woman, half a ghost. When her gaze found Daenerys, despair warred with something like relief. "You won because I loved them," she whispered. "I won because your people no longer feared you," Daenerys answered softly. She stepped closer, peering at the tiny face. Rurred, squalling, alive. "What is her name?" Cersei's lips trembled. "Joanna." Daenerys understood the choice. A name from before bastards and fire and prophecy. "She will live," she promised. "She will sail west with you tonight under guard. Casterly Rock's maester will tend you both. No harm will come so long as you do not return with sword drawn." Cersei closed her eyes. Tears shone on lashes. She nodded. A silent rush of breath left her, as if the throne's weight finally lifted. As Cersei was led away, Tyrion bowed his head. Jon exhaled. Grey Worm kept watch. Daenerys looked up at the towering keep, stone reddened by sunset yet unbroken. Inside its halls, echoes of cruelty lingered, but tomorrow hammers would ring building orphanages atop burned septs, and masons would seal wildfire vaults forever. She felt Drogon circle overhead, shadows sweeping across courtyard like a protective cloak. For the first time in years, Daenerys imagined dragons perched not as weapons but guardians, roofing a realm rebuilt without constant fear. She walked toward the throne room she had visited as petitioner. This time, she walked as queen. No bells tolled. The city listened in hushed attention, a hush heavy with hope. She would have one chance to honor that hope. One chance to prove mercy could conquer where fire once threatened. One chance, and all the long seasons ahead to justify it. Kai Dish Kennen. PGSQL. Dawn filtered through the shattered rose windows of the throne room, diffusing in pale ribbons that drifted lazily across dust motes. Daenerys stepped barefoot over broken slate and bent sword blades, feeling the cool, uneven stone beneath her soles. Each footfall echoed, soft but deliberate, through a hall that had witnessed 3 kings crowned and 3 murdered in less than a generation. She paused at the cusp of the great stair, but did not ascend. Instead, she lifted a fallen cloak from the debris, spread it across the jagged iron, and sat upon the lowest step rather than the throne itself. Metal rasped, settling like brittle feathers. Silence answered, fragile as spun glass yet vast as the belly of a cathedral. A soft rustle at the door drew her gaze. Tyrion appeared first, brow etched, sleeves rolled and smudged with soot from a night spent cataloging wildfire caches. Jon followed, hair loose about his shoulders, armor unpolished. a man dragged from half-sleep by summons he dare not refuse. Behind them, Davos wore the expression of a sailor who had survived too many storms to think this calm permanent. Grey Worm alone looked unchanged, helm tucked beneath his arm, every line of him disciplined steel. They halted just inside, exchanging uncertain glances. Daenerys raised one hand in greeting, palm toward them like sun to seed. "Sit," she said quietly. "Please." They crossed the floor, boots crunching over splinters. Jon lowered himself beside her on the step, fingers curling reflexively toward the pommel of a sword he did not carry at this meeting. Tyrion settled opposite, legs dangling like a boy on a wharf. Davos and Grey Worm remained back, but within earshot, silent sentries. "I cannot wear that crown yet," she began, nodding toward the twisted seat behind them. "Not while half the realm still doubts it belongs to me." Tyrion tilted his head. "Wear it or not, the city hails you queen. The city is not the realm." She gathered her knees beneath her chin, voice low. Highgarden simmered under Lannister boot. "River Run remembers dragons only as rumor. The North—" She cut herself off, glancing at Jon. "The North has pledged to you, to me, and to itself. That is a knot not easily untangled." Jon studied the dusty tiles. "The North will keep its word," he said. Yet hesitation trembled within the words like chill behind summer air. "Words are wind," she murmured, echoing an old Ironborn proverb. "We need roots." She drew a slow breath. "I ask you to help me plant them." Tyrion clasped his small hands. "You speak of a council, a great council, one that binds cities to fields, lords to small folk. Not a short-lived gathering, but a body that endures beyond one queen's reign." Her eyes sought each of theirs. If the people help choose those who lead them, perhaps they would fight less fiercely over who sits above them. Davos exhaled, a half-laugh. "You would invite fishermen and cobblers to the Red Keep. Fishermen know tides better than any maester," she answered softly. "And cobblers feel every pebble on the road before lords do." She lifted her gaze to the vaulted dome. "My grandfather hoarded power until it drove him mad. My brother believed power his birthright. I have held power in my palm and seen it scorch." Her fingers closed on memory. "I do not relinquish the crown, but I will share its weight." Grey Worm's voice carried across the hollow space, steady. "And when the weight grows too heavy for those who share it, who stands firm?" She turned to him. "Then the Unsullied do what they were made to do, protect the free." His jaw tightened with indescribable emotion, pain or pride, she could not parse. Tyrion cleared his throat. "A council chosen by, and representing, the major regions? North, Riverlands, Vale, Westerlands, Reach, Stormlands, Dorne Isles, Nador Tyrrell. And the city," Daenerys added. "And the free companies who bent the knee, and the faith." She faced Davos. "And the people of the narrow sea, who feed this realm more than any holdfast." Davos rubbed his beard. "I may know a few men who fish better than they speak, but they'll find words if the queen listens." Jon rose, pacing 3 steps. "The North will want its own voice. Not a voice chosen in King's Landing, a voice elected by Winterfell's bannermen. Let them," she said. "So long as they speak for peace and pay heed to harvest, their accent matters not." Tyrion cracked a thin smile, more of wonder than amusement. "You plan to rewrite 300 years in a single season. I plan to begin. Others will finish, if I lay a fair foundation." She extended a hand toward him. "Will you help architect it?" He placed his palm against hers. "I fear you'll regret asking a dwarf to carve palaces in stone. Only if you carve them too low." She squeezed his fingers, then shifted her gaze to Jon, waiting. The room paused with her, like breath held beneath water. Jon's gray eyes roamed the shattered hall, the forged blades arching above, ghosts of those who had ruled before them. When at last his stare met hers, what she saw in it was not merely love or loyalty, it was acceptance of burden. He drew his sword belt from his waist, unsheathed Longclaw, and planted its tip between them. "The North will sit at your council table," he said, "and I will speak for Winterfell, until my sister chooses otherwise." A hint of relief softened her shoulders, visible only to those close. She inclined her head. Thank you. Davos stamped a foot to rouse the hush. Well then, Queen's peace declared. Small folk cheered, council sworn. Shall we eat? The kitchen survived with only mild scorching. I could murder a bowl of stewed crab. Laughter surprised them. Fragile at first, then genuine. It reverberated across steel, like the hall itself dared exhale. And as the Queen rose, still barefoot, still dust-streaked, but smiling, each of them felt the future unfurl, not in shouts of victory, but in this simple sound of shared mirth. Outside, King's Landing breathed through ash-tinged dawn. Markets reopened beneath makeshift awnings of sailcloth borrowed from ships that once ferried armies. The Dragon Pit's ruins offered shelter to healers and the displaced. Blackwater Rush glittered, filmy with silt stirred by sudden floods, yet alive with river barges once more. Belle slept at last. A day passed, then another. Word of Cersei's abdication spread like dandelion fluff, seeding rumor and relief through hamlets and high seats. Ravens bore sealed scrolls from the Red Keep, each scripted by Tyrion's precise hand. Invitations to a convocation at midsummer, where lords and chosen explainers of the commons would gather to forge a new realm. Some houses answered with cautious assent, others with wary silence, but none with open refusal. War-weary banners preferred flutter to flame. In the afternoons, Daenerys toured the city astride Drogon, wings tucked, body coursing above rooftops just high enough to avoid panicked horses, yet low enough to reassure onlookers of his restraint. Children chased his shadow, shouting rhymes that braided dragonfire with Mercy Queen. Old women bowed from balconies, tears shining. Sel's words pointed astonished fingers while cleaning rust from unused blades. The dragon's roar echoed seldom, only when flocks of gulls dared encroach. Each day ended with him perched on the scorched dome of the Sept's husk, crimson scales turned apricot in sunset, sentinel rather than destroyer. One evening, as harbor lights winked awake, Daenerys sat on a low stone parapet above the docks. Salt wind teased escaped curls, weaving them with faint fish smell. Below, stevedores unloaded sacks of oats donated by House Tarly's new lord. Young Samuel, whose quill work secured ships faster than swords ever had. She watched sailors hand off sack after sack in chain. Each time the heavy cloth thudded on the pier, a cheer erupted. Hunger's grip loosened grain by grain. Footsteps announced Varys' approach, soft as always. He carried an oilskin bundle. Reports from the east, perhaps, or fresh counts of bread. He bowed. Your Grace. She patted the stone. Sit. Or do you fear staining silk? The Mipperselter. Silk washes better than gossip, he quipped, but remained standing, a respectful span behind. Ships from Lys bring word. The new Triarchs declare open trade with the Iron Throne, contingent on safe passage for their spice fleet. They worry about pirates. They worry about dragons, actually. Rumor says the Silver Queen feeds those who cross her and drowns those who bend the knee under generosity. Merchants prefer predictable peril to uncertain reward. She smiled faintly. Perhaps we should invite them to the council as well. Varys' brows rose. Foreign representation. A bold stroke. The commons at home may see it as dilution. Let them. Peace seldom respects borders. She watched gulls wheel. Were you always so cautious? He joined her at last, folding robes beneath him. I learned caution under men who valued little else but life extended. Yet I too believe bold strokes necessary, provided the quill does not snap. He set the bundle on his lap. Which brings us to realities. A court ruled by council will demand coin untainted by pillage. King's Landing lies half ruined. Lords Paramount will balk at new taxes while their fields lay fallow. No one, sorry. We need silver before harvest. She motioned to the docks. The harbor. Rebuilding the quays. Expanding. The stepstones war stripped us of tolls. Let us welcome merchants instead of extorting them. Lower duties. Encourage charter houses to set anchor here. In 2 seasons we recoup through volume, not threat. He considered. Forgive bluntness, Your Grace, but lords seldom trust mathematics over tradition. Lords will earn trust through proof. And if they refuse, The council will outweigh them. She stood, brushing grit from her skirts. Tell them the Dragon Queen conquered by restraint. They can surely endure lower tariffs. Varys' lips twitched in reluctant admiration. As you command. She left him studying the bustling quay. Mind already on tomorrow's docket. Audience with the High Septon. Inspection of grain mills north of the Gate of the Gods. Drafting charters for a rebuilding guild. Night bled rich violet across the sky. She crossed the courtyard of the burned sept where Drogon waited. Instead of climbing atop, she sat against his warm foreleg, drawing knees into arms. The dragon's chest rose and fell, great furnace breath slow. She leaned her head back until star-speckled sky framed in his horned silhouette. Thoughts drifted, of Viserys' sneer, of Rhaegal's fall over the narrow sea, of Missandei's bright laughter. Each memory pricked like nettle yet no longer bled. Time, like tide, receded just far enough. Boots crunched behind. Jon emerged, carrying 2 steaming mugs. He offered one. Willow bark and honey, he said. Milk's scarce. She sipped. The bitter bite warmed her chest. Do Northerners always dose medicine as drink? We dose drink as medicine. He settled beside her, back to Drogon's scale, who rumbled a sleepy snort. Tomorrow, I ride north to fetch Sansa. She glanced sideways. So soon. Council needs a northern voice not tied to me. If the realm is to trust this table, they must hear many women speak, not just the Dragon Queen. Her brow arched. You think they'll mind more dragons or more skirts? He smiled down into his mug. Both, I expect. His tone sobered. I've been many things, bastard brother king. This seat, hand, consort, whatever name they give me, I'm not certain I fit any longer. She rested a hand atop his. You fit here. Silence reflected starlight. He squeezed her fingers. Keep the Night's Watch alive, he said quietly. There must always be a shield. Now more than ever, with wildlings settling farmland and shadows, stirred beyond the Frostfangs. Send your free folk chiefs to the council, she answered. Let them speak for themselves. His nod held gratitude deep as winter lakes. I will. They talked long of small matters. Roofing for orphan halls, coins minted with 3-headed dragon on one side, direwolf on the other. A school for scribes, field hospitals staffed by maesters and silent sisters together. Plans twined like vine across trellis until dawn pinked again, and both realized they had not moved for hours, save refilling mugs from a passing potboy. When Jon departed beyond the King's Gate next morn, a small procession accompanied. Sir Davos, 2 northern spears, 3 maesters mapping safe roads, and a pair of trading envoys from Bravos, eager to witness new government. Grey Worm saluted them with raised spear, unsullied lined the avenue to honor their passage. City folk bowed or waved as they passed, pockets of cheers rippling like gusts along wheat. Daenerys watched from a balcony, heart caught between pride and loneliness. Drogon hummed behind her, sensing but not solving. In the Queen's solar later, she pored over lists, roof slates, lumber tallies, brick kilns. She signed charters granting guild status to carpenter collectives, funds to orphanage wardens, pardons for exiled poets invited to chronicle the realm's rebirth. Each stroke felt small yet necessary. Stitches in a vast wound. Afternoon brought the High Septon, robes patched where embroidery had charred. He knelt, bones creaking audibly. Your Grace, the faith lost walls, but not spirit. We bless your mercy and pray guidance as you guide us. Whoa. She offered funds to rebuild, on one condition. The new sept include a hospice wing large enough for war widows and fevered children. The Septon blinked, then smiled, tears tracking dust on cheeks. He agreed. They drafted edicts together, quills scratching harmony. Evening she convened with Tyrion, Varys, and a rising star. Miss Elise Sand, an educated bastard of Dorne, who had arrived with the first caravan bearing citrus and silk from Sunspear. Elisa spoke 6 tongues and parsed numbers faster than scribes could note them. Tyrion, impressed, elevated her to Master of Coin in all but title. She revised taxation on Myrish lace. proposed a network of roadhouses funded by low tolls, and suggested minting quarter dragons to ease petty trade. Daenerys welcomed the perspectives. Each one diluted old blood hierarchies. News from the west arrived on swift wings. Euron Greyjoy's surviving captains declared for Yara and sought pardon in exchange for escorting grain from the Reach. Raventree Hall's lord requested mediators for border disputes. The Val's young king, Robin Arryn, sent congratulations and 6 enormous falcons as a gift. The first convocation approached. Tents bloomed on the terraces outside the city walls. Bright canvas of every hue, merging into a patchwork festival. Merchants hawked sweet wine and oatcakes. Minstrels plucked. Water carriers scuttled. Tyrion organized lodging by region, careful to place historically feuding houses at safe distance until tempers gauged. A circuit court resolved minor claims each dawn, presided by Davos and 3 maesters. On Midsummer Eve, lanterns dotted the night like captured stars. Daenerys walked among pavilions cloaked in simple linen, hair braided plain. Few recognized her. Fewer approached, yet she overheard whispers. Queen who feeds, dragon who does not burn, mother from across the sea. One drunk Dornishman shouted her wine cost more than fire, but tasted better. Laughter rolled. Returning to the keep, she found Grey Worm sparring new recruits in the torchlit courtyard. Their spears flickered like shoals of silver fish. He dismissed them at her approach, sweat-sealing braids to scalp. Only when the last ran off did he speak. The men are uneasy. No battles to steal them, much idle time. Nain. Idleness breeds mischief. She concurred. How many construction crews need hands? All, he said bluntly. Rotate garrison shifts. Half billed by day, train by dusk. Pay them equal soldier's wage. He inclined his head. They will build with honor. She touched his shoulder. And perhaps find peace. His eyes warmed a moment before discipline smothered softness. He saluted, then strode into shadows. The convocation opened beneath a canvas rotunda stitched with woolen sigils. Inside, tables flanked a circular dais. Daenerys sat midway between highest and lowest vantage, neither above nor below. Seats filled with a tapestry of faces. Lady Sansa, hair copper waves, calm as winter sunrise. Gendry Baratheon, broad-shouldered, still smelling faintly of forge. Samwell Tarly, nervous, quill behind ear. Elise Sand, parchment stacks at the ready. Lord Royce, stern in bronze. Asha Greyjoy. No, Yara now. Maesters recorded as Tyrion opened with measured words. History of bloodshed, pledge of renewal, proposition of a council of the realm, 12 permanent seats, 8 for regions, 4 for commons, faith, coin, and martial. Another 12 rotating each harvest to represent guilds, ships, and free folk. Votes by majority, crown veto, limited. Debate commenced. Voices rose, not in screams of old wars, but arguments of trade routes, timber rights, number of harbor levies. Sansa pressed for charter safeguarding North's autonomy. Yara countered that seas fed all and Ironborn must fish beyond coasts. Elise proposed tariff credits for grain shipments north, if Ironborn carried them. Samwell suggested codifying each term in binding ledgers accessible in every holdfast. The hall murmured approval. Days stretched into week. Compromise trudged like mule uphill. Yet each sunrise they returned. Quills sharpened anew. Daenerys listened more than spoke, interjecting only to remind purpose. Peace, plenty, balance. When tempers frayed, she rose and walked the circle, hand brushing shoulder, whisper cooling sparks. Even Robin, enthralled, repeated her phrases. Balance, aye. At dusk of the 11th day, they ratified the Charter of 7 Flames. Named not for war, but for the 7 lamps of wisdom, Maester Tosha, lit above the dais. Elders signed with quill or wax thumbprint. When Daenerys added her flourish last, cheers cascaded. Outside bells, not alarms but carillons, rang anew, heavy and bright. That night the city celebrated in torchlit streets. Wine flowed, fiddles sang. Daenerys stood upon the tower balcony, gaze roaming starlight over masses swaying like wheat. Tyrion appeared, cup raised. 5 hours of speech, enough parchment to paper the Eyrie. But we have a charter. And tomorrow, she answered. We have work. Tomorrow, he agreed, sipping. But tonight, allow the queen to breathe. She eyed the dancing, the banners entwined, a dragon soaring low as toasting crowds. Tonight, she said, we all breathe. She stepped back, entered the quiet corridor, and made her way toward the still shattered sept. There, in the hush where rubble met moonlight, she knelt among budding weeds. She pressed fingers to earth turned by laborers clearing stone. Seeds lay beneath, scattered by wind or secret hands. She brushed soil lightly and whispered in Valyrian. A lullaby once sung by a mother she barely remembered. A sprout trembled, leaf unfurling. She smiled, rose, and left the gardens to their slow, stubborn work. Weeks melted into a season. The Reach's harvest wagons arrived with surplus glinting golden, filling storehouses. Tyrion's quarter dragons jangled in markets. Children traded them for honey rings. Roadhouses sprouted along Rosewood and King's Road alike. Simple timber, hearth, cots, stew, always simmering. In their doorways hung tokens. Scarlet cloth with a white three-headed dragon coiled around a crown of wheat. North of the neck, wildlings tilled thawing soil beside black brothers turned farmers. Census scribes drafted blueprints for glass-walled greenhouses, warmth captured for year-round greens. East, Brevosi bankers invested in dredging the Blackwater, carving deeper channels for galleons. Dornish architects presented sketches for a public bathhouse, harnessing dragon-heated aquifers. Tyrion loved the decadence. Varys loved the hygiene. Pain lingered, threaded through progress. Bandits preyed beyond war-ravaged borders. Plague spots flared in refugee camps. A failed harvest in the Stormlands threatened hunger anew. Yet for each ill, the council convened swiftly. Funds redirected. Healers dispatched. Dothraki outriders escorted grain south. Masters inoculated children. Unsullied hunted bandits. Problems persisted, but solutions followed. Sometimes limping, sometimes swift, never hopeless. One early winter dawn, Daenerys rode out with an escort toward the burned fields near Stony Sept, where rumors spoke of a lone knight flying Cersei's sigil and raiding grain convoys. Frost silvered stubble. Breath smoked from nostrils. Upon a ridge, she spotted the outlaw camp. Rag tents, a rust-eaten lion banner. She dismounted alone, cloak glittering with hoarfrost, and approached. The knight stumbled from a tent, armor ill-kept. His gaunt face bore grief more than malice. He knelt before drawing sword. I sought only to feed the queen who feeds no more, he rasped. She disarmed him gently and asked his story. Widow. Children dead of fever, pledged to Cersei for promise of bread. In peace they starved. In war, they burned. Now only oath remained. Daenerys extended her hand. Ride with me, she said. Build granaries rather than rob them. Honor lost souls by saving living ones. He wept, clasped her offered wrist and followed. Such moments repeated, small yet piling like stones into a wall of quiet loyalty. Mercy not weakness, justice not flame. She wielded both when needed. Qyburn's surviving alchemists faced trial, wildfire forbade. Pirate captains who refused parole found their ships sunk by gray-winged Rhaegal's son. Drake hatched on Dragonstone cliffs. Yet those who yielded earned amnesty and trade charters. The message spread. This queen's fire burned only when all else failed. Come spring, cranes dotted cityscape, wooden arms swinging marble blocks into place atop new sept spires. The dragon pit metamorphosed into an amphitheater for council assemblies and markets. Its once fractured dome patched with glass mosaics depicting not conquest, but the 7 major sigils circled by a dragon at rest. One late afternoon, Daenerys sat in that amphitheater's highest tier, alone save a sparrow snagging crumbs. She held a letter from Winterfell, Sansa announcing betrothal to a river lord to cement grain alliances. Arya roaming far seas aboard a Braavosi caravel but sending maps. Bran now called King of Weirwood, guiding ravens along frontier to track sickness. Jon, still hand forever straddling winter and fire. She closed her eyes, letting wind carry wood smoke and rose scent. Soft wing beats overhead. Drogon descending, body blotting half the sun. He landed upon the wide stone dais and settled with a sigh. She walked down, pressed brow to his. Heat radiated. For a moment, Queen and dragon shared one heart, pulse roaring like tide. She pictured the realm as it could be in 5 years. 10. Orchards blooming where ashes lay. Council halls in each region. Dragons ferrying healers instead of soldiers. Stories of mercy outweighing those of terror. A dream fragile as new leaves, but alive. She opened her eyes, stepped back, and scratched Drogon beneath a scale. "Come," she whispered in High Valyrian. "Work remains." He crouched. She climbed. Wings unfurled, beating rhythm steady and sure. They rose together over King's Landing, over rebuilt quays, market tents, bathhouse domes steaming, road caravans threading gates, children chasing kites shaped like dragons glowing in sunset. She guided Drogon eastward, toward the tree line where new orchards awaited blessing fire to fertilize soil. Farmers looked up, shading eyes, not with dread, but expectation. The dragon banked. Flames erupted in neat, controlled sweep, churning earth to ready cradle. Cheers rose. Twilight-painted river and sea violet gold. Drogon soared back across city towers. Bells rang, not alarm, not surrender, but marking day's end. Their tones wove through sky with steady assurance. Here is a city reborn. Here is a land in cautious bloom. On a parapet of the red keep a banner fluttered. Black field, red three-headed dragon encircling a golden ring of grain. Daenerys circled once more, then landed in the courtyard where Unsullied bowed. Scribes waited, petitions to sign. She dismounted. Dust swirled and settled. She straightened her cloak, smoothed wind-tossed hair, and walked toward the archway, each stride measured, steady, silent but resonant. And as she crossed the threshold, torches sprang to life down the corridor, illuminating her path with gentle light. Neither wildfire's fury nor conquest's glare, but a glow carved by deliberate choice, by toil shared, by hope hammered into lantern glass. She moved within it, queen of realm and conscience alike, and the people beyond those walls. Lords and farmers, maids and maesters, children with dragon-shaped kites, each carried a spark of that same light, stitched inside their days as firmly as any history, ready to flare whenever darkness next dared whisper. The night finally settled deep and soft around King's Landing, and sleep found her late, pen falling from fingers over yet another charter draft, dreams rising like warm breath on a gentle wind, dreams in which dragons flew not as harbingers of death, but as heralds of dawn, still years in the making, but coming. Always coming. PGSQL. Autumn's hush settled over King's Landing like a quilt of copper leaves and mellow sun. On the long stone terrace above the eastern curtain wall, Daenerys leaned against the Merlin and watched caravans gather at the Dragon Gate. Light wagons rattled beneath buckets of green apples from Fair Isle. Heavy wagons creaked under barrels of arbor red, beats of oxen hooves sounding in a rhythmic drum on the flagged rise. The smell that drifted to her, a weave of cider and straw and distant forge, tucked itself behind her ribs, the surest sign yet that the city had survived its own rebirth. Where weeds and corpses had clogged these roads only months before, raucous teamsters now argued over queue order, while a pair of gilded twins from Braavos serenaded the waiting drivers with a twanging lute. Footsteps padded up the stair behind her, soft but steady. Grey Worm appeared in plain linen. Spear left behind for once, scroll tube in hand. She raised a brow. He rarely sought her alone unless the matter cut too close for ease. He drew the leather cord, unrolled a square of parchment and held it out. "A missive from the Stormlands," he said. "Marked urgent." She read in silence. Lord Boros Baratheon's neat but angry script told of thunderless skies, of barley stunted at sprout, of a blight that blackened rye heads before they filled. 6 villages along the rainwood fringe wailed for food. He asked, no demanded. Relief and, if rumor proved true, the loan of a dragon to call down storms from the cloudless heavens. She exhaled. He believes me rainmaker now. Grey Worm's gaze flicked skyward, perhaps expecting thunder. Do you command skies? No more than he does. She rolled the parchment. Dragons fire, they do not weep. Then we send grain. We do. And healers with potash and compost to sweeten the soil. She turned back over the wall, eyes on the wagons. But not enough alone. We need ships. The Reach can spare half a harvest. The Ironborn can sail it faster than oxen drag. All right, Yara. Daenerys. Grey Worm did not move. The drawn set of his jaw nudged her sense like a warm palm on the back of the neck. Say it, she prompted. Famine spurs unrest, he said. Boros curses Lannisters, Targaryens, gods alike. Hungry men follow loud voices. She remembered Marion's zealots, Astapor's butcher kings. Then let us quiet hunger before it hears him. That afternoon she convened a quick council under the lattice of the half-rebuilt small hall. Tyrion, Alisi Sand, Samwell, and Davos ringed a circular table of raw cedar, still smelling of sap dirty. Maps unfurled, inkpots opened, ledgers spread. Alisi traced shipping lanes while Tyrion tallied surplus. Sam muttered yields. Davos whittled shipping timetables. They worked until dusk fingers turned parchment unreadable. A third of Highgarden's tribute, Elise concluded, tapping quill, plus Hornhill's oats and Fair Isle hardtack. 30 carracks if sail, 15 galleys if oar, 3 days load, 5 days underway, 10 if seas turn rough, Davos warned. We dispatch dragons to scout storms. Tyrion set his quill aside. A show of royal concern warms colder bellies. Daenerys agreed. I ride Drogon myself. A queen who feeds learns what those she feeds endure. She penned orders to Yara Greyjoy. Assemble her swiftest ships at Storm's End. Haul grain, guard against stepstones, raiders rumored to recrystallize under a new captain. She sealed the letter with red wax and pressed her signet. The 3-headed dragon now ringed by a stalk of barley. 3 mornings later, the grain fleet departed the Blackwater. Sails blooming like cream petals on a restless sea. Drogon glided watch above, his shadow sweeping decks crowded with burlap mountains. Daenerys rode strapped to the saddle Tyrion had refitted for long distance. Smooth leather, iron stirrups, shaped like talons. Wind needled her cheeks. Salt stung her eyes. Below, sailors pointed and cheered each time the dragon banked. Proof to the world that this voyage bore the Queen's promise. The horizon broke in, iron cliffs. Storm's End jutted, squat and defiant. Yara's fleet already bobbed offshore, black sails trimmed indigo. The Kraken sigil replaced by a painted sheaf of wheat. Daenerys circled once, spiraled down to the broad lawn outside the massive drum tower, and dismounted. Yara awaited in a sealskin jerkin, grin crooked. Could have offered you a cabin, she called over the wind. Decks less bumpy than sky. I prefer a view. Daenerys embraced her briefly. How many holds filled? 11 galleys near burst, 8 more half-laden. My men tapped hidden wells in the holds for brinewater ballast. Grain rides drier. Yara beckoned toward crates, stacked under canvas. Tarly's harvest. She kicked one. Smells like horse but cooks well enough. A horn bellowed. The arrival of a Stormlander envoy. Lord Boros Baratheon himself rode through the Barbican, flanked by grim knights, banners limp in a windless gloom. He dismounted, boots thudding mud. His glare flicked at Drogon, then at Daenerys, weight of an old house daring a new one. You come with grain, he said without greeting. Will it sprout? If your soil still welcomes seeds. Daenerys met his stare. This shipment feeds the hungry while the land heals. You will spread compost and ash from dragon-fired earth. They enrich where blight has bitten. Boros snorted. Ash from dragonfire. Convenient for a queen of dragons. Convenient but free, she answered. My dragons will fire your fallow fields, not your granaries. The Lord's shoulders eased. You ask payment. Allegiance at council, levy of builders to help restore the King's Road bridges, and 2 seats for Stormland Commons, next convocation. She waited. He grumbled, but hunger is a clamp. Done. He spat in palm. She met it with her own, sealing bargain. Over the next week, Drogon scoured fields of blackened rye, breathing controlled gouts that burned husks to ember and fused toxins to glassy beads. Farmers followed with rakes, mixing ash and pig dung into topsoil. Rain threatened but never broke. Still plumes of sterile smoke rose across the rainwood like ghost beacons. Word spread that dragonfire could heal as well as ruin. During a twilight respite, Daenerys walked the narrow fort wall alone. Heat thunder still thrummed behind her eyes from the days-long flights. She paused above the sea. Dusk flared crimson. Waves crashed slate below. A rustle of mail drew her attention. A youth emerged from a shadow crevice, small knife flashing. He lunged. She pivoted, cloak whipping. The blade scraped her sleeve, shallow cut. She caught his wrist, twisted. The knife clattered. He yelped. Thin, no more than 14, Stormlander by accent, green eyes wild. Who sends you? She asked, breath even. No one. Panic cracked his voice. My sister died in the last war. Lion men. All queens lie. I won't starve again. Tears streaked soot on his cheeks. She held his wrist until the pulse steadied. Killing me won't feed you. Come. She led him down to the courtyard kitchens, past startled guards. There she bade the cook set a bowl of barley stew into his shaking hands. He devoured it, eyes darting. When he finished, she knelt, healing salve dabbed on his scraped knuckles. Storm's End has work, she said. Porters earn coin, meals, roof. Report to the steward. If you choose that path, you serve people, not hunger. They surrendered. He nodded mutely. Guards escorted him to the keep. The cook, a broad Scarhame woman, whispered to Daenerys as she left. No queen I served ever fed the hand that tried to kill her. Then let us hope he uses it to build. She returned to her chamber, cleaned the slice on her arm. It stung little, but the truth sliced deeper. Relief's harvest ripened slow. Hunger's weeds shot overnight. Mercy must be constant, vigilance quicker. The grain mission succeeded. Ships offloaded in bayous, grain carted to storehouses, blight fields burned and seeded anew. Boros kept his pledge, flooding council with surly but genuine builders. On the return flight, ravens met her. Reports from bravos of pirates reforming, raiding Myrish spice runners, painting their sails deep violet, a color once worn by the Golden Company. Resurgence threatened trade and food routes alike. She landed on Dragonstone to hold a naval war council. Yara Davos, 2 new captains from Claw Isle, and an odd guest. Sir Roderick Quickwater, a former cell sail flagged now as master of the new royal fleet. Charts spread across war table, stepstones, currents, reefs. Yara jabbed a finger at a narrow channel south of Bloodstone. They lurk here, pick fat traders, slip into coves when warships pass. We root them like rats, Roderick proposed. Heavy Drommons, chain nets, fire arrows. Daenerys scanned the surf beyond grim windows. Fire arrows risk merchant hulls. Net them, demand surrender, offer parole. Pirates who bend become escorts. Those who don't, the sea will judge. Nenabstamo. Yara sighed. Mercy at sea often ends in dagger behind your back. It ends in fleets, not graveyards, Daenerys retorted. We need sailors as much as soldiers. Plans forged. 3 squadrons. Greyjoy galleys spearheading, Drommons blocking retreat, dragon scouts overhead. She would ride Rhaegal's young son, Valerion, smaller than Drogon but nimbler for sky swoops over hidden coves. Before departure, she climbed Dragonstow's wind-carved spire to gaze over the narrow sea, where dawn cracked turquoise. Memory washed ashore. Crossing this water first time, uncertain girl nursing dragon eggs, heart full of quest. Now she crossed as queen, yet still the uncertainty thrummed. Power alone never settled storms. Rule was endless tide reading. She whispered to the sea, "Hold." The campaign spanned a fortnight. Galleys threaded shoals under moonless sky. Valerian's keen eyes spotted lateen sails unfurling. Nets cast shimmered like silver webs. Grapnels hooked. Boarding actions brief. Pirates shocked by the presence of royal decree and dragon shadow. Many surrendered. Those who fought died quick. Hulls set ablaze away from trade lanes. When the final violet banner smoldered into black water, Daenerys accepted oaths from surrendered captains on the deck of Yara's flagship. They knelt ringed by barrels of seized saffron and turned out holds of terrified spice merchants. She granted clemency to all but 2 slavers whose cabins stank of irons. They were hung at low tide, their bodies left to gulls. Word carried, pirate or prince, slavers find no harbor. Victory feast aboard the sea bitch roared late. Yara downed spiced rum. Davos told jokes of storms and ghosts with crabs for hands. Daenerys drank water laced with lemon, watching camaraderie mesh men who once raided each other's shores. As laughter ebbed, she slipped to the stern, wind cool on brow. Valerian drifted overhead, wings hushed giant oars. She thought of Jon in Winterfell, trading letters thick with logistics and shy affection. Night deepened. She wrapped cloak tighter, feeling both invincible and small. Upon return, King's Landing buzzed with news of stepstones pacified. Markets brimmed with saffron, cinnamon, new sails of violet, repurposed into awnings above baker stalls. Yet peace never idled. Varys reported whispers of discontent among Westerland's lords, resentful of tax relief, extended to reach farmers, but not to gold miners now facing exhausted veins. Tyrion urged investigation. Elise set auditors to inspect mine claims. Around the same time, a parchment arrived from Old Town. Archmaester Marwyn, long thought half-renegade, requested audience concerning events of creeping ice and restless fire. She invited him. He arrived weeks later, astride a lean palfrey. Robes patched, but eyes fierce. In the solar he laid out dusty scrolls older than Aegon's conquest. Tales of shard-white spiders glimpsed beyond Skagos, a frozen mist that swallowed fishing boats. Magic, he argued, ebbs but never ends. The wall's fall woke things not yet seen. He urged vigilant watch along northern coasts, recommended forging mirror dragonglass beacons lit by dragonfire itself, harbor lights bright enough to scatter whites that might wander sea flows. Daenerys felt old dread stir, memory of Hardhome relayed through Jon's halting words. She funded the beacons. Grey Worm dispatched stonemasons north. Sam drafted design. Wildling chiefs agreed to tend fires. Tyrion quipped they built lighthouses of hope against fears half imagined, but he signed the orders. Season rolled. The first anniversary of Cersei's abdication approached. Preparations filled streets. Carpenters lashed frames for paper lanterns, brewers steeped cherry mead. Septon choirs practiced a hymn newly minted called Reforgin. Daenerys planned a procession from the Dragon Pit to the Red Keep, flanked by each region's banners, visible symbol of unity. 4 nights before the festival, when the moon slid wetly behind storm shreds, a fire broke in the Silk Sands district. Flames leapt building to building, unnatural hot green tinge on the edges. Grey Worm led unsullied with copper pumps. Rhaenyn answered half an hour later, dousing the blaze. In the charred ruin they found ceramic bombs bearing Qyburne's sigil cached beneath the tailor's floor. Wildfire in clay meant to shatter beneath the celebrant's feet. A plot, timely found. Investigation led to a remnant alchemist cell, hiding under the dragon's sewer. Captured, they confessed to a lord's payroll. Lord Ulrich Lefford, lesser cousin to Casterly Rock, stung by tariffs and eager to sow fear of dragons. Tyrion pressed for leniency. Lefford could be used as example of justice tempered. Daenerys demurred. He meant to roast thousands. She ordered trial before assembled council. Evidence damning, verdict swift. Death, but by choice. Sword or scour. Lefford chose sword. Ser Brienne, visiting envoy from Sansa, carried it out in a single clean stroke. The alchemists were exiled to the ruins of Pike to study saltpeter under watch. The festival proceeded unmarred. Lanterns soared, dragons traced lazy loops, bells chimed. In the Dragon Pit amphitheater, Daenerys spoke briefly. Of rebuilding beams hewed from many forests, of a realm still imperfect but patient as tide. 500 torches formed a ring behind her. Inside it, every banner rippled. She ended. We breathed together, an echo of Tyrion's first jestful advice, and the crowd repeated the phrase like prayer. Later, beneath starlight, canted crisp as new coins, she walked alone to the godswood transplanted from Winterfell's offshoot seedlings. The heart tree sapling stood knee-high, leaves pale. She touched bark, cool and living. Footfall behind. Jon arrived early without announcement, dust of a 6-day ride on cloak. She turned. Their eyes spoke months of letters unsent. He took her hand, pressed it to the weirwood's face. Sap glistened like milk blood. "It grows," he murmured. "Slowly," she answered. "Strongly," he corrected. They strolled along lantern-lit gravel, past night-blooming lilies imported from Dorne. Conversation flowed, halting at first, soon easy. Wildling beacons alight and holding, North's glass houses sprouting kale mid-snow. Arya rumored to have discovered lands west of Sunset Sea, Bran's ravens tracking summer snows. He spoke of homesickness for both Winterfell and her arms. She of weight that never lifted but sometimes glowed. Under the old sept arch they kissed, unhurried. Dawn found them in Solar with counsel. Jon reported white rumors along frozen bays. Davos proposed rotating watch detachments to those coasts. Elise revealed mine audits. Westerland's not so depleted but hoarding. She recommended sliding levy-matching barrels extracted. Tyrion navigated the narrow straits between pride and fairness. Daenerys signed compromise that shaved taxes yet demanded vocational retraining funds for minor families. Days layered upon days, tapestry mounting. Teachers from Old Town established reading houses in Flea Bottom, teaching letters by lanternlight. Smiths from Volantis set up bell foundries, forging carillon so pure their chime traveled 2 streets. Dothraki partnered with riverfolk to breed swift ferry horses, crossing the Trident for coin. A guild of glassblowers built a greenhouse on Rainey's Hill. Papaya fruit, first in Westerosi soil, stunned maesters. Not all threads gleamed. A fever bred in the river delta, carried by rat fleas. Within a fortnight, children coughed blood. Maester Helvey and Rooks, rest, recognized early signs, sent Raven. Daenerys read the report over breakfast. By dusk, she mobilized. Ships converted to floating infirmaries. Iron cisterns boiled water, distributed via casks. Unsullied patrolled drains stamping out rat warrens. Drogon flew low over infested districts, his heat purging refuse piles too massive for men. The fever ebbed inside a moon. Casualties less than 1 in 20, miracle by old plague measures. Still, each name etched into a memorial plaque set by the river gate, blossoms daily renewed by orphan hands. Year turned. Spring sun shone gentler, as if mindful of new streets. In the Dragon Pit, Daenerys oversaw the first election of common seats. Butchers, weavers, tanners, midwives chosen by peers to sit 1 season on council dais. The spectacle odd but joyous. Candidates gifting bread or shoes to passers. Debates held on overturned ale kegs. Cheers erupting where once riot had. The winners stood trembling in borrowed finery, pledging to speak for those who sweated at bellows and birthing beds. On the night preceding their first session, Daenerys hosted them in a small garden court, fragrant with night jasmine. She served plain fare. Stew, crusty loaves, a tart of lemon imported by Sam's southern cousin. She listened more than spoke, absorbing fears of tariffs, hopes of better roofs, dreams of children's school. One tanner's apprentice, cheeks freckled, confessed she'd never stepped inside a palace before. Daenerys smiled. "Now you help decide how one is run." Awe lit the girl's brown eyes. That same week a raven arrived from Casterly Rock. Cersei, now thin and reclusive, requested permission to send young Joanna to court fosterage under Daenerys' tutelage. The council debated hours. Some argued the child a threat, others saw opportunity to mend ancient wounds. Daenerys penned reply: "The child welcome under safeguards." Weeks later, Joanna arrived with a wet nurse and 6 silent Lannister guards. Gold curls, shy eyes. Daenerys knelt to greet the toddler. Joanna reached to touch the dragon's sigil on her gown. Laughter bubbled, tension eased. She lodged the child in sunny chambers adjacent to the old nursery, assigned tutors in letters and gardening, skills chosen to root compassion early. Time's river flowed. Grey Worm accepted de facto post as Captain General of the City Watch, blending unsullied discipline with gold cloak numbers. Crime dipped. Those crimes that remained met swift but measured justice. He married, in quiet candlelit ceremony, a healer from Ennith originally freed by Missandei. No feast. Just gentle vows in Valyrian and Ennathi tongues, and a garland placed around each other's necks. Daenerys attended, eyes glossed. Happiness, she thought, was a blade smiths rarely forged for warriors. Here, at last, one new blade shone. Tyrion, ever restless, spearheaded a library project. Salvage every manuscript, scattered by war, duplicate via scribes, trained in Braavosi speed calligraphy. Tower room of the Red Keep, filled with shelves, scrolls, codices. Evenings he and Sam debated philosophy of governance, cups of arbor red fueling discourse. Varys drifted between alcoves, whispering that knowledge conquered knives. Elise Sand advanced coin reform. Copper stags remilled smaller, silver falcons introduced. Gold dragons drilled with tiny puncture to lighten and mark new mint. Economists grumbled, forgers cursed. Trade smooth. Across the sea, Triarchs honored trade pact. But Volantis' envoy brought warning of a Red Temple faction proclaiming Daenerys Azor Ahai and urging holy war to claim fate. She penned polite refusal. Still, Red priests multiplied in dockside alleys. Sermons fiery. She allowed faith, but forbade calls for violence. Some priests complied, others vanished into stepstones once more, perhaps sowing zeal elsewhere. At summer solstice, the second convocation convened. Common seat spoke. Lords listened. A miller from Hayford argued for cap on grain tariffs. He won allies in Samwell and Gendry. A midwife proposed queen-funded birthing house in each regional capital. Funding passed after heated debate. Daenerys sat back, marveling. Power once perched solely on her shoulders now fluttered across many. After closing, she rode Valrian north with Jon to inspect ice beacons. They soared over frost-rimmed cliffs, landing at lonely towers where free folk fed coal fires ignited by a dragon's spark. She watched flames glare bright against eternal dusk, reflecting blue on black sea. In that halo, she and Jon walked, hand-laced, discussing a union not merely political. He feared talk of heirs, too many babies crowned then buried in history. She understood. They spoke of adoption, of fostering many, of building rather than birthing legacy. Snowflakes kissed her eyelashes. He brushed them away. They returned south to find riots in Lannisport. Miners disgruntled by new safety rules slowed ore extraction, merchants hiked prices, townsfolk raged. Tyrion volunteered to mediate. Daenerys accompanied incognito, cloak dyed done. They met in a smoky guild hall, benches packed. The queen spoke plain as Smith. Miners' lungs precious as gold, new ventilation shafts save lives. The crown loans coined to retrofit tunnels, repayment scaled to yield. She pledged city watch assistance against price gougers. Her sincerity cracked stone. Strike ended. In the aftermath, a gang leader named Ruddy Hen, paid by Lefford loyalists, threw a torch toward her. Grey Worm's thrown spear pinned the torchman's wrist to a post. Crowd gasped. Daenerys ordered he be treated, then tried by Lannisport's own midsummer court. Sentence came. 5 years labor widening air shafts, he tried to stop. Justice, small but witnessed. That night, in the Rock's guest hall carved from red stone, Tyrion stood beside his older brother's old armor, dusty on a stand. He lifted helm, grimace soft. So much steel, For so little protection, he murmured. She came to him. You protected them today without any. He half smiled. Words cut deeper when spoken by those who once commanded dragons to burn fleets. Words and deeds both wield fire, she answered. He poured wine. They toasted to miners, to breathing. Years gathered. The beacons along Frost Coast endured. No white sighted, though occasional packs of snow bears turned eerily white were hunted. Bran's ravens charted shifting auroras. Maesters compiled his notes in a tome, The Dance of Lights. In the south, the bathhouse heated by dragon vents became minor miracle. Plague nearly vanished among lower city as baths cleaned bodies. One crisp winter eve, council chamber lit by whale oil lamps. Jon knelt before Daenerys, produced not ring but a simple carved wooden wolf entwined with dragon. He offered it. She slid it onto a leather cord, wore it around neck. Council erupted into cheers, save Varys, who coughed elegantly. But even he smiled. Wedding planned for spring equinox, to be held outdoors where cherry trees now lined the Walk of Mercy. Invitations sent to every hamlet as well as great house. The ceremony would blend northern tradition, oaths spoken beneath heart-tree sapling, grown now shoulder-high, and Valyrian vows whispered in the tongue of dragons. Preparations thrummed. Seamstress guild stitched gowns of winter-white brocade, shot with scarlet thread. Smiths forged twin circlets, one steel chased with obsidian, one silver with frost opals, intended to rest upon each other when joined. The amphitheater seating expanded. Dornish vintners rolled casks of citrus wine. For once, all seemed bright. Then ravens arrived from the East Watch beacon. A trader's crew found bodies on a floe. Skin gray, eyes blue, mouths sewn shut with ice. The corpses melted under sun but never thawed. Steel shattered them like porcelain. Wildlings slew them, then burned what shards remained. Green flames sparking when mist touched char. Maesters debated. Necromancy residue? Others infiltration? The realm braced. Daenerys summoned the council. They resolved. Bolster watch. Continue lighthouses. Dispatch dragonback patrol monthly. Sam suggested forging dragon steel. Valyrian iron alloy tested at Qohor to embed in tower spears. She funded research. Winter lingered, then loosened. On equinox, petals drifted like pink snow across the courtyard. Jon stood in black and white leathers, wolf fur embroidered with argent threads. Daenerys approached in gown of dove satin, cloak clasped by silver dragon, and direwolf kissing. Bells hushed. Before the sapling they spoke. Of shield and hearth. Of days honest and nights gentle. Of duty stitched to tenderness. Bran, arriving in wheeled oaken chair, pronounced union witnessed by old gods in new sky. Grey Worm clasped their joined hands in Valyrian. Sansa draped a northern shawl upon their shoulders. When they kissed, Drogon's roar shook cherry blossoms loose. Petals swirled like confetti. Feast spilled into moonrise. Lanterns glimmered. Jugglers tossed torches. Dwarfs reenacted the long night until Tyrion bribed them to bed. Daenerys danced first with Jon, then with Grey Worm, who moved stiff but honored, then with little Joanna Lannister, who giggled and tucked blossoms in the queen's hair. Tyrion toasted absent friends. Missandei, Yora, the thousands whose bones paved this new peace. He raised goblet high. To the living that built, and the dead that laid the stones. And the crowd echoed until throats rasped. Later, alone at parapet, Daenerys and Jon watched twin moons, the real and its reflection in Blackwater Bay. Fires dotted hills. She rested head on his shoulder. 10 years ago I dreamed only of throne, she whispered. Now I dream of orchard yields. He brushed lips across her hair. Dream both. One feeds the other. And you? She asked. I dream of snow melting where flowers can root. He pointed across the dark water where a faint glow rimmed horizon. The first of Bran's northern beacons, bright enough to rival dawn. They stayed until cold bit, then retreated hand in hand through quiet corridors, lantern guiding them past dozing guards. In the nursery they paused, watching Joanna Lannister sleep curled with a wooden direwolf. Jon touched Daenerys' waist. "Someday," he murmured. She covered his hand but said nothing. Hope a flutter not yet winged. Months after, a swift ship from Braavos delivered sealed scrolls. Trade revenues doubled, Stepstone's alliance held, but also rumors of sorcerers combing ruins of Valyria, searching hearts of Shadowfire. Threat or myth, unclear. Daenerys ordered watchful eyes, yet refused knee-jerk war. Let information pave response. Peace matured into routine. New convocations swore in commons as matter of course. Lords accepted their votes debated by tanners. Dragons nested on cliffs above city. Hatchlings hatched, 2 red, 1 pearl white. Old women said auspice. And still, beyond those walls, farmers sowed, sailors sailed, teachers taught. Crime came, storms came, plagues flickered, differences sparked. But each time flame stayed small, smothered by many hands carrying buckets, rather than one sword of fire. On the 5th anniversary of her landing, Daenerys walked alone at dawn toward the harbor jetty, barefoot, as on her first morning waiting outside Meereen's gates. Tide foam lapped cool. She watched gulls wheel. Behind, bells tolled hour of first council, but briefly. Their song faded into morning hush, leaving only wing beats and distant laughter of dockhands beginning day. She smiled, quiet triumph deeper than any cheer. Drogon descended by her side, folding wings like memory tucked warm. She laid palm on a scale, felt steady pulse thrumming under. Together they turned toward the city, whose skyline shimmered amber in rising sun. Towers patched, domes fresh tiled, smoke curling gentle from baker chimneys, banners of many colors rising on the same breeze. She breathed in salt and bread and possibility, then stepped forward, queen of peace that must be worked at every dawn, mother of dragons that healed as well as burned, woman shaped by fire yet guided by mercy. The path ahead remained long, its stones uneven, but with each step, her foot found steadier purchase, guided by council voices, strengthened by hearts of people she served. And somewhere above, the dragons wheeled not as omen of ruin but as emblem of balance. A reminder that the greatest power is choice, and she had chosen, again and again, to build. Her next footfall carried her into the golden light, and the world, 5 years unburned, walked with her. K.A.P.G.S.Q.L. First light gilded the bay, and seabirds in endless skeins traced the same restless figure eights they had flown since before dragons ever darkened Westeros. On the Queen's Tower, balconied Daenerys watched their looping dance while a scribe finished tying the silken strings that bound a thick folio. Wax dripped. The 3-headed dragon took the seal's shape. Another treaty, this one with the red-sailed merchants of lies, was done. The city below hummed. Hammers on the new opera house beams, chatter of apprentices at the glassworks, the clang of morning bells that signaled shift change in the river mills. 14 years had passed since the war, yet every dawn still felt slightly miraculous, like a wager the realm kept winning by the slimmest breath. She left the balcony and walked a corridor whose arched windows framed the rebuilt Great Sept, its god statues recast in humble bathstone, shoulders rounded so pigeons could nest without fouling the eaves. The door at the far end was ajar. Inside, the small council already waited around an oval table that Jon liked better than the old rectangles. No hard corners, he said, for words to hide behind. He sat now in plain black doublet, silver direwolf stitched at one breast, hair dusted with the first streaks of gray at the temples. When Daenerys entered, he rose out of reflex. She touched his arm to keep him seated, and took her own chair, unceremonious as any clerk come to reckon accounts. Storm runners report strange lights over the stepstones. Roderick Quickwater was saying, fingertip on a vellum chart. Not the auroras we see sometimes this far south. A violet glow right on the waves, spreading in spiderweb filaments for leagues. Ships that sailed through it lost wind, as though the air itself thickened. Maester Sam, rounder than ever, and flecked with ink, adjusted his spectacles. Similar phenomena are recorded in Ash-Eye scrolls. Sea of shadows, sorcerous humors collecting on salt. He tapped a margin note. If what the captains described is true, the water itself may be laced with wildfire residue from the Doom's volcanoes, mixed with certain Eastern magics. Tyrion pinched bridge of nose. Apologies, Sam, but mixtures of sorcery and tar are still, at bottom, tar. We can fight tar, fire, sand, vinegar, and prayer, Varys asked mildly. Age had slowed his stride but not his edge. The Red Temple's High Flame speaker is touring the free cities preaching that the Dragon Queen is the flame made flesh. Our fleets can battle tar. What of armies roused by prophets? Silence circled. 12 years of peace had not dulled the room's memory of fire-crazed mobs. Daenerys folded her hands. We meet prophecy with policy. A legation will sail to Volantis at once. Yara will command. She will carry cargoes of grain at famine prices and grant safe conduct to any pilgrim wishing to see the truth of this realm with their own eyes. Fanatics promise salvation. We show it. Elise Sand, now master of coin in name as well as deed, nodded brisk approval. Subsidized fares for the first 1,000 pilgrims, then market rates. If they wish to walk in the light of the Queen, let them pay for the oil of the lamp. Quickwater cleared his throat. Begging your grace's leave, trade is one thing, but if those purple sails take on cannon or alchemists, I will escort the fleet, came a voice from the doorway. Grey Worm stepped inside, bronze scarf at his throat, the same spear in hand he had carried up Slaver's Bay and down the Blackwater. 2 wings of unsullied marines, 3 storm skiffs. The fleet is safe. Jon considered the soldier a long beat. And the coastlines here? Bandits still pry at the Dornish marches. Grey Worm's dark gaze never wavered. New captains of the watch defend the marches. They are ready. Daenerys studied him. In 15 years the lines at his eyes had deepened, but whatever clay once molded the unsullied had baked into something more durable than steel. Widowhood, his healer wife taken by marsh fever 2 summers earlier, had not bent him. Grief had simply sharpened his edges. She inclined her head. Go then, take Valerion to scout. Council moved on. Sam produced a cask of pale sand from a northern beach where the beacons burned brightest. Its grains, fused by dragon heat, were forming black glass shot through with crimson veins. Firestone, he called it. Impossible under lesser flame. It rings rather than shatters, and if alloyed with steel, he handed a blade as thin as parchment to Tyrion. It hummed when flicked. We may have found something tougher than Valyrian steel. Half the realm still mistrusts Valyrian steel, Tyrion muttered, turning the sliver under lamplight. Imagine their comfort when told we forged something worse. But Daenerys felt a thrill at the shard's music. After all these years of building, this was the old excitement again. The taste of tomorrow. She asked Sam to continue experiments and dispatched birds to Cahor's master forges. The meeting broke near noon. Jon lingered beside the window where a gull perched on the sill, cocking its head as though eavesdropping. Outside, autumn light struck his face, emphasizing the quieter confidence the years had laid upon him. Are we stretched thin? He asked softly. East, west, north. Trouble everywhere. Always, she answered. But now we have roads to ride and ships to sail and larders full before we march. He brushed a strand of silver from her forehead. At dusk, I ride inspection south. Come. She smiled. Try stopping me. They departed within the hour, leaves spinning from plane trees along the terrace of farewell. Daenerys astride Drogon, Jon on a rangy chestnut destrier, a modest escort of spears in couples behind. Below, the city billowed like a tapestry, roofs tiled in sunrise glaze, copper stills exhaling perfume from new apothecaries, children in dawn-colored smocks chasing hoop rolls down the lanes. They crossed the Gate of the Gods and descended into the rich ochre of the King's Road fringes, where vineyards now checkerboarded slopes that once held siege trenches. At evening they reached the first of the new beacon ponds. Shallow basins dug at every day's march, lined with pale stone. When lit by lamp oil, these mirrored pools turned night to noon for 1,000 paces around, deterring highwaymen and guiding late caravans. Jon dismounted, knelt on the flagged edge, and dipped a hand. "If White Walkers ever rise, the road itself will burn before them," he murmured. "And if they never rise, children skip stones on the light of our caution," she countered. Then she laughed at her own loftiness and kicked water at him. It splashed up, catching sunset's last flame. He pulled her down, and they sat side by side on the rim, breathing the vine-scented twilight. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked after a lull. "The risk? The pitch of everything balanced on swords." A night bird chirred. She considered. "Sometimes. It is easier to feel alive when the edge is so near. But it's also easier to die. I prefer long breaths now." She felt his gaze. "And you?" "I miss clear fronts," he admitted. "An enemy in the field has purpose. Enemies in council wear silk and smile." He traced a fingertip through reflected clouds. "But I'm learning. We are always learning." They rode again under a sky salted with stars. Drogon wheeled above, a mobile moon eclipsing constellations. 2 hours before dawn they reached a village no bigger than a stable yard. 20 cottages circled a copse where an ancient shield tree bled amber sap. Fires crackled, but the people stirred at the dragon's shadow. Doors opened. Curious faces emerged. Potters' wives, a one-armed plowman, children with straw dolls. No panic, only wonder. This was the realm she had wanted. Jon slid from the saddle, greeted the Reeve by name. He had memorized every village chief from Blackwater to Moat Cailin. They shared cider in a barn lit by glowworm lamps, strung like necklaces from the rafters. Daenerys listened as Jon asked about harvest, about border quarrels, about a broken wheel on the communal ox cart. The Reeve answered plainly. Harvest good, quarrels settled by the circuit court, and the wheel already replaced with timber from the Queen's own forests. When they left, a pair of shy twins pressed braided rush crowns into Daenerys' hands. She tucked the brittle offerings into her saddlebags. 2 days' ride brought them to Summerhall's ruins. Wild roses rambled through the scorched bones of the old palace. Young willows made green tunnels of its sunken courts. Years back she had decreed the site remain unbuilt, a place where daughters and sons could come and see what heedless pride cost. Yet now a scaffolding rose on the eastern flank, and inside it men in orange smocks, chiseled stone. Thormund blanched when the royal party approached. Your Graces, the Memorial Museum. It is as you commanded. Jon lifted an eyebrow at her. Daenerys smiled faintly. The council had voted beyond her original vision. Inside the ring of stone, a domed lantern of pale glass would house artifacts. A single spear of the old Targaryen guard, a charred cradle, pages of Aerys' diaries, pain preserved like amber. Necessary. They camped that night in Summerhall's central court. Jon built a small fire, no bigger than 2 fists, and skewered larks that the squires had snared. Daenerys leaned back against Drogon's warm foreleg, eating with fingers. Flame played in Jon's eyes. He's slowing, he said softly, nodding at Drogon. She'd felt it. The lift of his wings a shade less vigorous, the time between great flights lengthening. Dragons live long, she answered, but not forever. She stroked the ridge of scales. He's content. When he tires of sky, he naps in the sun like an old cat. Jon's gaze softened. He earned it. They spoke then of hatchlings hatched since Valar, small and swift as a hawk, Morax, whose hide glimmered pearl under moon. Little Balerion, black on black, with wings already broader than a warship's beam. Someday Drogon would seed the sky. The realm would not lack guardian. Near midnight, Grey Worm's falcon arrowed from the south. Message capsule bright dot-eyed. Daenerys unrolled the scroll. Quickwater's fleet had reached Volantis unscathed. Pilgrims flocked, but undercurrents swirled. 3 high priests refused the queen's invitation, denouncing her refusal of the final flame doing. The Unsullied observed muster of cell sails along the lower Rhoyne, contracts inked by an unknown magistrate. She passed the note to Jon. Your people will choose you over shadows, he said. They must be shown the difference. In Volantis, Yara Greyjoy stood on the stern castle of the Sea Bitch 2, while the black walls erupted with torch frenzy. Chanting rolled across the harbor, thousands of painted slaves in red hoods, marching, banging bronze bowls. Atop the hewn obsidian bastion, a priest in robes of smoldering russet raised a spear, wreathed in false flame. Yara spat overboard. One spark, and half this city cooks. Grey Worm beside her scanned the crowd. We keep spark away. Within the hour, Queen's missive reached them. Hold harbor. No aggression, but remain ready. The next dawn, Yara climbed the gangplank to the war galley Devotion, where 200 pilgrims waited. Dockhands, spicewives, a limping girl whose arms were tattooed with Valyrian runes. Each signed a charter promising peace, then boarded the Dragon Queen's ships. Priests on the walls shouted curses. The pilgrims ignored them. Yara's fleet raised anchor and slipped down current. On the quarterdeck, the limping girl wept. She had left her only home, but where she sailed, there were promises of bread and baths and schooling. Yara, who had rarely promised anything but pain, found herself comforting. Quite awkwardly, a stranger. They made Westeros in 12 days. As the first view of the new harbor bloomed, sea gates shaped as twin dragons arching over the channel. The pilgrims gasped. Yara had grown jaded by the sight, but today she too felt its hush. A city once charred now rising on marble piers, cranes swinging bright copper arms, the tallest lighthouse in the west crowning the point. They docked. Wardens guided the newcomers to registration halls. Braided rush crowns given by schoolchildren welcomed them, same as those Daenerys carried in her saddlebag. Small courtesies repeated became armor against terror. Back in King's Landing, Daenerys met the pilgrims in the Dragon Pit amphitheater. She wore no diadem, only a simple linen gown, and spoke in High Valyrian so priests could translate without twisting. She welcomed them to watch the council, to walk the roads, to disagree as free voices. If you came seeking miracles, she said, you will instead find markets, wells, libraries, tools, not wonders. The miracle is what people build when no one stops them. Over weeks, the pilgrims dispersed among districts. Some found work in glashhouses, others apprenticed at the bathhouse. 3 priests concluded the Queen's peace was indeed the God's peace and sent letters home urging reprieve. 2 zealots attempted to ignite a grain silo. They were caught by volunteer fire watch, persuaded to abandon violence after an afternoon in open debate hall, where artisans recounted life before the Queen. The zealots laid down torches. One later joined the hospital order. Meanwhile, trouble ripened elsewhere. North of the wall, watchers spotted white foxes with eyes of blue fire slinking through the slush. Bran's raven spoke of an ancient heartbeat under the ice, muffled yet insistent. At council, Sam proposed an expedition. 10 scholars, 20 rangers, to reach the fist of the first men where old magic pooled. Jon volunteered to lead. Daenerys opposed. He was father now to 2 wards, Rhaella and Torhen, fostered from orphan houses. But Jon only smiled. The realm still has edges, he said. Someone must check the stitching. He rode out on a crisp dawn, wind whipping the new wolf and dragon standard. Daenerys kissed him at the gate. Bring me a snowflower. He promised, though snowflowers were myth. With Jon gone, Tyrion shouldered more. Reports piled. Miners in the west had indeed withheld gold, but now petitioned to open a representative mint, striking coins bearing a roaring lion and the phrasing "the kingdoms united." Tyrion huffed. They finally accept the union once their pockets profit. Nonetheless, he sponsored the application. Elise saw advantage, diversified mintage would stabilize currency. In Dorne, a flash flood swept the Planky Town delta. Storehouses drowned. Daenerys dispatched grain and masons. On the Iron Islands, a plague of gray rot ate the new potato crop. She offered diseased soil expert from Citadel. She traveled less these years, trusting governors trained under her charter, but for crises she rode herself, queen by hoof and wing, sampling water quality, quizzing bakers on flour price, settling boundary feuds under the same pear tree, where Robb Stark once mustered banners. Her presence remained the strongest medicine. Drogon's age showed. He preferred long thermals to sharp stoops. After a flight, he dozed in the palace mews, younger dragons adorably crawling over his sides. When Daenerys scratched between his horns, he rumbled contentment. She whispered, "Rest, old friend. I will wake you only for sunrise." Winter brought word from Jon's expedition. They had reached the abandoned castles along northern coast, set beacon fires, but discovered obsidian pillars thrust up through permafrost like black fangs. Etched upon them were spirals reminiscent of the Night King's sigil. Jon's letter read, "We broke one pillar. Within it blue light glowed like trapped stars and then died." The ice beneath thawed a span. He urged Sam to study the fragments. Sam, at the south, ground the sample under crystal lens. Threads of ice glass shimmered, carrying what looked like veins of the same firestone as in southern sand. "Frozen wildfire," he called it, though no flame. "Targaryen heat binds, others cold fractures. If those pillars multiplied, they might reshape seasons." Daenerys stared at the glass sliver reflecting torchlight. "Magic is a coin," she murmured. "We purchase peace with one side. The other side now demands cost." She ordered a third of the dragonglass stockpile shipped north along the Blackwater and the gift roads. Should ice again march, this time it would find dragons waiting not behind a wall, but spread across the land. True threat, however, marched from the sea. Late one fog-choked evening, watchlights on the new lighthouse detected sails. Scores of them, violet under moon, but bearing no emblem of known free city. They came in two arrowed formations, cutting the dark like twin knives. The alarm bells pealed, beacons roared. Grey Worm's fleet already returned from Volantis answered. But the enemy turned not to harbor. It struck the coastal salt farms north of the city, torching barns, snatching villagers. By dawn they withdrew, leaving ash and the sigil of a broken sun carved in driftwood. Refugees poured south. Tyrion's spies learned these raiders called themselves the Dawnborn, an alliance of exiled Essosi Cell-Sails, rogue mages of the Shadowlands, and remnants of the Golden Company. Their prophetess, one Lady Jay, preached that only by extinguishing dragonkind could the world escape the Great Wheel. She wielded strange alchemy. Reports spoke of bombs that burst green ice, not flame. The council convened in emergency. Daenerys listened, jaw set. "We can outfight pirates," she said, "but prophets battle stories with stronger stories." She commanded open moots in every market square. Survivors of the raids recounted what they had seen. No embellishment, just truth. Tailors sewed banners of clasped hands. Scribes distributed broadsheets in 7 tongues explaining the Charter's rights. If Dawnborn sought to fracture with fear, the realm would knit with witness. She also acted militarily. Patrolling dragons doubled, watchtowers fitted with firestone ballistas, Grey Worm's marines drilled night attacks. Yara sailed to the Mander mouth and fortified a riverine fleet, ready to dash wherever shore caught fire. Brienne, now Lady Commander of the March, rode the Stormland coastline personally. Weeks stretched taut. Lightning storms shattered the night, as if echoing tension. Then ravens came black with dread. The Dawnborn fleet, 100 hulls, surpassed even Euron's final muster, had massed off Massey's Hook and turned north. Grey Worm's ships intercepted. Sea battle erupted under a sky flickering unnatural mauve. From the city walls, watchers saw distant flashes like silent fireworks. Daenerys climbed Drogon before full dawn, though healers warned his wing joints stiffening. He rumbled agreement. Together they soared east. Valerian and Morax flanked, younger dragons eager. Wind lashed, clouds bruised purple. Ahead the sea burned with witchfire. Slicks of violet radiance on the waves, sucking sound and color. Ships collided in that glow, timbers warping. She directed Morax to strafe left, Valerian right. Drogon dived. Below, Dawnborn hulls bore sigils of a cracked sun around a black void. Catapults flung jars that burst chilling haze. One clipped Valerian's flank, ice crust spread across scales. The young dragon shrieked in pain. Daenerys wheeled Drogon between, unleashed flame hotter than forge iron. Fire met haze. Steam erupted, lime bright. Haze shattered, ice cracked. She shouted not in rage but command. "Bright fire, steady!" Drogon's breath answered older yet potent. A bolt of red so deep it blackened light. Haze parted. Grey Worm's flagship rammed a Dawnborn corvette. Unsullied swung over rails, spears thrust. From the enemy deck, a woman in robes scribed with comet shapes raised an hourglass of obsidian. Violet bark spooled. She pointed at Drogon. A lance of purple lightning arced skyward. Drogon banked, but age slowed him. A glancing hit seared his left wingtip, leaving scales smoking. Daenerys felt the pain as her own. She gritted teeth. Valerian, freed, stooped onto the sorceress's deck, crushing masts. The hourglass shattered. Its contents, liquid night, oozed, hissing. Without sorceress cover, the Dawnborn line faltered. Yara's galleys, darting among bigger hulls, loosed flaming bolts. Firestone ballistas on Grey Worm's flagship thudded, their bolts singing like tuning forks, piercing hull and heart alike. In the brightening day, the mauve haze dimmed. Ship by ship. By noon, only 9 Dawnborn vessels fled south. Morax pursued, but Daenerys called the young dragon back. Pursuit risked trap among Stepstone's shoals. Better to hold what sea was saved. She landed Drogon on the flagship's blood-slick deck. He panted but lived. Healers pressed poultices of crushed pearl root into the scorched wingtip. Daenerys knelt by the unconscious sorceress, sleeper's chain shackling slim wrists. Up close, Lady Jia was barely 30, hair snow-white, eyes ink-black. When water splashed her face she hissed, staring at the queen. "You serve flame that must end." "Flame keeps more cold away than you know," Daenerys replied. Jia laughed brittle. "All wheels break. Even yours, breaker of chains. A deeper night comes." "It always does," Daenerys murmured, signing for jailers to take the prisoner. "And we light torches." Weeks of repair followed. Wreckage washed ashore for leagues, lumber and bone. Volunteers combed beaches for survivors. Many Dawnborn sailors accepted asylum, claiming they fought only for coin. Tyrion arranged labor pacts. They would rebuild the very villages they had burned. As the first houses rose, coastal folk watched uncertainly but did not interfere. In King's Landing, the trial of Lady Jia became the most fraught question the council had faced since Cersei. Execute, imprison, or attempt redemption. Red priests demanded she burn. Maesters asked for study. Commoner petitions insisted justice, not vengeance. Daenerys visited Jay in the deep cells. The woman sat cross-legged, humming. Her chains were warded by glyphs Sam insisted might quench magic. Daenerys asked, "Why this war? A dream?" Jaya whispered, "Of a river of knives, of a monster chained in stone, of a queen on a throne of feathers." She tilted her head. "My dream. You think yours holier?" Daenerys answered honestly. "No, only tested." In the end, the council sentenced Jaya to exile on Skagos under watch. Research her powers to ensure no threat. Some cried weakness, others foresaw knowledge. Daenerys walked away carrying weight of doubt, but weight shared by all. Autumn aged into winter. Jon's party returned gaunt but unbroken. They carried no snowflowers, but a sack of star shards, fragments of ice pillars, now quiescent. Bran had guided them away from a rumored deeper nest. Something stirred in that nest, Jon said. Its heartbeat matched Storm's. Yet he believed the beacons and dragons formed a net strong enough. Peace resumed. A little frayed, a little wiser. Wrecked beaches were replanted with saltgrass. Firestone blades entered trial service with the city watch, edges never dulling. The Volantine pilgrims built a low temple of no hierarchies where flame was tended by orphans, sermons spoken by whichever voice had doubt to voice that day. Red priests, visiting from Essos, admitted it was the strangest holy house they'd seen, and perhaps the purest. Drogon's final flight occurred on a spring morning 3 years after the Dawnborn War. He rose from the palace mews with unusual vigor, spiraled higher than he had in seasons. Circled the Hightower lighthouse once, twice, then banked east into the dawn glare until he was a dwindling mote. Search riders pursued. None found his resting. Daenerys felt no panic, only a profound quiet. She believed some secret valley in Valyria welcomed old kings of sky. She ordered no further hunt. Morax, Valar, and Balerion. The younger took up the skies. Rhaella and Torhen, teenagers now, vied to tame Valar. Daenerys laughed to see them oiling the dragon's talons like stable hands. Choice would come, not by blood alone, but by bond. The charter matured into constitution. Regions rotated speakers smoothly. A third of the common-born who had sat their season on council later won election as reeves or guildmasters. Roads thickened with commerce. Water wheels powered looms. Teachers taught arithmetic beside letters. Libraries loaned books bound in firestone leather that never mildewed. Huge mirrors on Blackwater cliffs bounced sun into alleys at dawn. Plague flared only rarely. When it did, it met infrastructure. Yet some lessons bit harder. A drought struck the Reach. The grain reserve held, but panic prices spiked until the Queen ordered release of royal granary stock without tariff, then arrested 3 cartel lords for collusion. Merciful, people murmured, but not soft. In the 20th year of her reign, a comet returned, green tails smearing heaven like a dragon's breath. Priests again cried omen. This time, Daenerys made festival of it. Knights of Lantern floats down the river. Each lamp carved a wish for the realm. From the ramparts, she and Jon watched 1,000,000 lights drift under the comet's glow. It began with a red comet, she said. Perhaps it ends with a green. Jon wrapped an arm around her waist. Stories don't end, they rest. She laughed, then let it rest well. They aged, hair silvering, joints aching. But each morning they walked the garden where the heart tree sapling had become a towering white and crimson sentinel shading herbs, imported from NEE. Beneath its boughs children played, fosterlings from 7 kingdoms, progeny of pilgrims, scions of old houses. Differences blurred there, as in the council hall. On Daenerys' 50th name day, the council gifted her a map, not of borders, but of bridges built. Aqueducts, roads, fiber of trade, lines of script connecting libraries, strings of beacons. At the map's heart was etched a single phrase: "We breathe together." She traced the roots, remembering the terrified girl who once stepped from a penthouse balcony into marriage she did not want, remembering the breaker of chains who nearly lost herself to flame, remembering the queen who refused the pyre a second time, and saw what might grow from cinders instead. Tears welled. "I did not do this alone," she whispered. Tyrion, stooped now, winked. "True. Without me, you'd have squandered twice the treasury." Elisa laughed, flicking his ear. Grey Worm gave the briefest nod, pride shining calm and fierce. That night, after feast and fireworks, Daenerys walked alone to the parapet, where wind smelled of apple blossom and salt. Above, Balerion the Younger crossed the moon, wings vast, bearing Rhaella on his back for her first night patrol. The queen lifted her hand in salute. The dragon answered with a distant roar, half challenge, half lullaby. She stood until the shapes melted into night, then turned inward, toward her chambers where Jon waited with a final cup of sweet nettle tea. "Tell me a story," she said, slipping beside him. He smiled against her hair. "Which one?" "Any." "All? What? The one where we are both still becoming?" "No." Outside, the city's lanterns dipped and brightened in the breeze like a living constellation. An echo of the sky's own silverness, balanced upon a promise renewed each dawn. That power, tempered by mercy and shared by many, could mend more than it marred. That dragons might guard without scorching. That history's wheel, if not shattered, could at least be coaxed to turn slowly enough that ordinary life, and somewhere beyond, perhaps, an even deeper night rehearsed its return. But here, for now, the lights held. In the hush between heartbeats, Daenerys breathed, steady and deep, and the realm breathed with her. Kai. The dawn after her 50th name day broke in mists thick as velvet, blanketing the towers in soft gold and muting the city's waking clangor. In the garden below Daenerys' window, Early risers swept fallen petals from the heart tree's shadow, their laughter rising in bright bursts before the bells began their day's work. For a while, Daenerys let herself watch, hands folded beneath her cheek, savoring the rare stillness that came before the stream of scrolls and small folk. The arguments over market taxes, or the latest squabble between the smiths and glassblowers' guilds. In her bones, every morning was an astonishment. She had expected to die in fire or on a blade or beneath her own promise. She had never expected to live so long. Her reflection in the glass showed hair gone mostly silver, streaked with white like the first snow on the red mountains of Dorne. Her hands bore the fine webwork of time. She wore those changes with a kind of pride, each year purchased not by war, but by the quiet resistance of hope. The wheel, she thought, was still turning, but slowly now, its teeth caught on compassion. She dressed simply, in blue linen. A dragon brooch closed her cloak at the throat, but she wore no crown. A queen in council needed no more. Today, Sansa Stark arrived from Winterfell, riding with a great party through the city's north gate. A river of gray banners, snowflakes stitched in silver thread, flanked by wolves running at the horses' heels. The Northern Queen's visits were rare, and always marked by celebration. Sansa herself had grown formidable, her beauty dignified, her voice low and sure, hair swept back from a face unmarked by time, except for a single white streak that cut through the red. She arrived in the high hall just as the bells ended, cloak of white fox draped over her shoulders. "Your Grace," Sansa greeted, bowing low. But the smile between them was warmer than formality. "Sansa." Daenerys opened her arms. The Northern Queen stepped close, pressing cold cheeks together as sisters might. "You bring winter with you." "I bring the promise of spring, if the gods are kind," Sansa answered, eyes sparkling. "And letters from Arya. She's found a chain of islands past the sunset, each lush as the summer isles. She'll return when the wind dies and the sea grows dull. Bran sent a map. He says the crows there build nests as wide as a horse cart." Daenerys laughed, a real, ringing sound. "And you? What do you bring for me?" "Only my eyes," Sansa replied. "To see the world you've built. To measure it with northern caution and," her voice softened, "to remember the days when we were only girls hiding from monsters." She glanced out the windows, where banners flew. "It seems monsters are rarer now." "Not gone," Daenerys said, "but fewer, and they are smaller, easier to find. Sit, please." The council assembled. Tyrion, now bent and sharp as a crow. Elise Sand, stern and bright-eyed. Samwell, broader than ever, always with a new bundle of ink-stained books. Grey Worm and Brienne, silver flecks in their hair, still sat at either end, silent pillars. The business of the realm flowed. A dispute over river fishing rights, a sudden price rise in salt, a clever proposal to teach Braavosi number games in the city's poorest schools. Sansa listened, then spoke. Her questions always pointed toward the root of things. Who benefits, who suffers? What would this mean in a winter 10 years from now? She and Daenerys debated the millers' demands for a grain monopoly. Sansa suggested a trial period, Daenerys a subsidy for new bakers. They agreed to both, smiling at the compromise. When the business ended, Sansa asked for a tour of the city's quietest corners. They visited the bathhouses that now doubled as fever wards each spring, the salt market rebuilt from old wreckage, the library where orphans copied poems and prayers. On the steps of the dragon pit, Daenerys watched Sansa kneel to tie a loose shoe for a dirty child, and thought, not so different from the girl I once met on the green at King's Landing. As dusk fell, they dined together in the small solar, Jon joining them, hair touched with steel but eyes as clear and haunted as ever. He spoke little, but listened to the two queens with a gentle pride. Later, Sansa took Daenerys' hand, tracing the old callus where a sword's hilt had hardened the skin. "You remember the north as it was, I think," Sansa said, voice soft. "How cold. How bitter. How easily the snow killed what it touched." "I remember a hearth as well," Daenerys replied. "Warmth, when all the world seemed ice. I remember the first time I saw the snow fall on Dragonstone. It felt strange, like a blessing I didn't deserve." "We all thought that," Sansa admitted. "But I see now what warmth can make, given time." She smiled, slow and a little sad, and what dragons can do when they choose not to burn. In the following days, Sansa walked the city, learning how law and custom meshed, how small folk voted for their own reeves and brought grievances to common courts. She sat in the council as a peer, proposing measures that favored the north, but also the riverlands and the isles. When she left behind a treaty promising more grain for the Reach, more iron for the north, and an unspoken trust that should the dark come again, they would stand together, not apart. The seasons rolled. Arya returned at last, her ship limping into port, a dragon circling overhead to guide her home. She brought strange fruits, glimmering pearls, and tales of green lands where no snow had ever fallen. She wore her scars as proudly as her rings. Daenerys received her in the dragon pit, where Arya bowed awkwardly, then flung her arms around the queen, laughing. They dined that night with Jon and Sansa, and for a few hours, the world seemed a smaller, safer place. Letters came from the far north. Bran wrote in his drifting, eerie script of strange lights over the sea and new trees blooming where only ice had ruled before. Sam and the maesters studied the changes. Some said magic waxed, others that it waned. Either way, the beacons burned on, the dragons flew, and children grew strong in a realm built for living, not dying. Years passed. The city grew, spreading gardens and schools into districts once ruled by hunger. The glass foundries at the river's edge sent colored panes as far as Old Town and Pentos. New markets opened for books, for music, for instruments that had once belonged only to high-born children. Old wounds lingered. A drought here, a dispute there, but never festered. Every few years, a new clutch of dragon eggs hatched. Daenerys, sometimes with Jon, sometimes alone, sometimes with grandchildren riding behind her, would fly above the city, their shadows long and slow, the people below waving banners in welcome, not fear. She watched the world change. The Iron Islands, governed now by a council of shipwrights and priestesses, sent more ships and less threat. The Stormlands traded barley and sheep, sending sons and daughters to study in the new city schools. Even Dorne, ever proud, joined the realm's great council, its water gardens sending engineers north to build canals. Daenerys welcomed each shift, each hard-won peace. In the coldest winter of her reign, a sickness swept up from the south. The council moved quickly, recalling every lesson of fire and fever. Ships quarantined, new bathhouses turned to infirmaries. Dragonfire used to cleanse entire blocks of pestilence. The city lost thousands, but tens of thousands lived. Each spring after, they remembered the dead in song and in silence. At 60, Daenerys' steps slowed, but her mind did not. She relied more on Rhaella and Torhen, her fostered heirs, on the sharp wit of Sansa's granddaughter Myra, on the steady hand of Elyse's youngest son. She listened, weighed, guided. She sometimes walked alone at night, listening to the city breathe. The stars overhead were unchanged, but the world below was different. A little softer, a little safer. Jon grew older too. Sometimes they walked the rebuilt walls together, speaking of old battles and lost friends, of the dead whose memory became lighter over time. Sometimes they spoke of nothing, content to share the hush. Drogon's children still flew above, and one evening, Daenerys and Jon watched from the parapet as two dragons soared over the Blackwater, moonlight silvering their wings. The city lights below flickered, echoed in the river. "I did not think we would have so much time," Jon said softly. "Nor I," Daenerys replied. "But I am grateful." They kept faith with each other and with their people. Every year, Daenerys presided over the Great Council. Every year, the banners were more faded, the hands lifted in pledge a little older, a little changed. The faces changed too. More small folk, more women, more names from Essos and beyond. The council hall rang with voices that had once been silenced. The arguments were loud, the laughter frequent. When at last Daenerys' health failed, the city mourned. She slipped away on a night of clear stars, Jon's hand in hers, Rhaella's head bowed beside her. Tyrion reading aloud from the first charter she had signed. Sam reciting a prayer in 3 tongues. Arya and Sansa standing at the foot of the bed, unspeaking but present. Drogon's children waited outside the windows, wings still. Her passing was marked by silence across the realm. Bells muffled, fires banked low. In the morning, every dragon in the sky passed low over the city, their shadows stretching across the river and the fields beyond, silent benediction. Jon spoke the eulogy, voice rough and strong, telling not of wars won or kingdoms claimed, but of quiet days, gardens, a city rebuilt and held safe by a queen who had learned mercy. Sansa and Arya spoke too, their memories a braid of sorrow and triumph. The story of girls who had survived, who had made the world gentler. Daenerys was buried at the heart tree, roots grown thick and sure. Her tomb bore no crown, only a carving, a dragon who chose mercy. Years unspooled after her, and the world did not collapse. The council went on, changing faces, changing laws, but always bound by the memory of what peace had cost and what fire could become. The dragons flew still, not as harbingers of doom, but as guardians and guides, their shadows gentle. And in quiet moments, when a child laughed in the market, or when a baker shared bread with a stranger, or when a woman voted for her neighbor in the council's common seats, it seemed sometimes that the queen herself lingered. A breath in the wind, a warmth at the hearth, a promise renewed with every dawn. So passed Daenerys Stormborn, the queen who saved King's Landing not by flame but by faith, who learned in the hardest ways that to rule was not to conquer, and that peace once forged must be kept again and again. The wheel turned, but softer now. Each spoke shaped by those who remembered her name, and by those who, never knowing fear, walked the streets of the city she left behind and called it home. Yaha. She was gone, and the city did not crumble, though for 3 days the bells did not ring and the streets felt hollow. The laughter of children softer and further away, as if sound itself remembered loss. On the 4th morning, as the mist burned from the bay, a procession moved along the river roads, a line of black and silver, of old banners and new, a river of faces, lords and maids, merchants and smiths, children with wreaths of glass-blown flowers, aged veterans into bards, patched by a dozen peace years. The heart tree's roots formed the resting place, and the people came not only to mourn, but to witness what lingered. Rhaella and Torhen knelt first, hands pressed to the earth, each whispering words that vanished into the moss. Tyrion, leaning on a cane of firestone, wept without shame, and was comforted by Sam, who recited the names of every queen since Nymeria, ending with Daenerys, breaker of chains, builder of roads, mother of mercy. Sansa sang the old songs of the north, her voice clear as the last winter star. Arya stood at the edge, quiet, a smile touched with grief, and beneath her cloak her fingers pressed to the hilt of needle, one of the last blades now unbloodied in memory of the world they had built. Jon spoke only once, when dusk had blurred the banners, and the city's lanterns winked to life, one by one across the river. He said, "She gave us more time than she ever hoped to claim. Let us honor her with what we do in the days she bought." The council pledged, hands lifted in solemn promise, to keep the charter whole, to never let the power of dragons outpace the compassion that steadied them. The realm itself did not stop for sorrow. The spring followed, inexorable. In the fields, the new plows turned deeper furrows, and children born in peace took their first steps beneath banners that flew for justice, not for war. The council grew larger, more voices rising from the corners of the kingdoms. New faces came. Maester Myra, Sansa's granddaughter, her hands always ink-stained. Gendry's boy, now a smith himself, who built the city's first windmill that could grind grain and pump water both. Eliza's daughter, who took her mother's place in the council with a fierce, careful clarity. Rhaella wore no crown, but the people called her queen. She had the silver hair, the measured voice, the gift for listening. More her father's calm than her mother's fire, but still with a spark when justice called. She ruled not from the iron throne, melted now and recast into plowshares and market bells, but from a simple dais in the council chamber, her seat equal to those around her. Torrin, sworn as her first counselor, kept the peace of the roads, a quiet strength who walked the city's lanes each dawn, greeting baker and beggar alike. In their time the city faced hardship, a flood on the Blackwater, a summer of rot that threatened the eastern orchards, whispers of unrest in the far western hills where old lords dreamed of crowns and power lost. The council responded not with swords, but with roads and granaries, with engineers and peace envoys. Dragons still flew, Balerion the younger, with his pearl-white mate and a trio of hatchlings, and their shadows passed overhead in reassurance, not in fear. Rhaella's reign was marked by innovation. She established the first college for healers in the city's old sept, inviting maesters, herbwives, and even the silent healers of Korth to share their knowledge. She made a law that no child would go without learning their letters, and in the city's southern ward, she personally taught girls to read each year, her soft voice threading through the marketplace before sunrise. The council sent delegations to the new islands Arya had discovered, opening peaceful trade and bringing back fruits never seen in Westeros. Crimson melons, golden nuts, spices that perfumed every street. The council's greatest test came in the 10th year of Rhaella's peace, when a winter longer and harsher than any in living memory descended. The sea froze in the harbor, and even the dragon's fires struggled to thaw the snow that piled high against the city walls. Grain ran thin, and the city's oldest complained of hunger, remembering the sack and the fire of their childhoods. But Rhaella called together the council, and each region sent what they could spare. Even the north, who shared dried meats and smoked fish. Even the Isles, who sent barrels of pickled eggs and salt-cured eels. For the first time, the city did not riot, did not burn. Instead, people queued in the cold for their share. And in the evenings, Rhaella and Torhen rode dragonback through the city, dropping parcels of bread and kindling, listening to those in need, promising that spring would come. It did in time, slow as always, but no one died of hunger. And when the first crocuses bloomed on the city hills, a feast was held that lasted 3 days, with songs in every tongue. As the years spun on, the city changed and grew. Glass towers rose at the river's bend, each reflecting sun and starlight, so the city never seemed dark. The old sluns became gardens, watered by clever pipes, and watched over by the dragon's slow, thoughtful patrols. Ships from Valeria's haunted shores arrived with peaceful envoys, offering gifts of obsidian and secrets from the deep. And the council welcomed them, carefully, always remembering that magic had 2 faces. Bran Stark, now the eldest living soul in the north, sent his ravens each year with new maps and weather warnings, and sometimes his own voice would speak from a raven perched on the council table, dry and calm, reminding all that the old magic still watched, still cared. The wildlings once feared, now tilled fields south of the wall, their children growing up speaking both the old tongue and the common speech. Arya came and went, her ships bringing wonders. A silk as light as moonlight, a horn that played a single note which calmed even the wildest horse, tiny glass orbs filled with swirling colors from the lands beyond the sunset. She never stayed long, but when she returned, the city seemed to brighten. Sansa grew older in Winterfell, but her daughter Myra became a great lady in her own right, traveling south to negotiate every new treaty, her mother's cunning and her aunt's fire combining to win respect and peace. Jon lived out his days in the city, walking often among the markets, always silent, but always greeted with a nod or a smile. He taught children to ride, to fight, but more often to read and to listen. As the oldest dragons began to slow, new eggs hatched, and it was said that no 2 clutches were alike. Some dragons bore scales of midnight, others iridescent green or gold, one even the pale lavender of dawn sky. The people believed each was a promise of change, of new beginnings, of the cycle that would outlast them all. Once, in the twilight of her years, Rhaella stood on the old city wall with Torrin, watching the city glitter as torches flared along the river, their light caught in the glass towers. She said, "I fear that someday, fire will come again, that some hand, greedy or fearful, will loose what we have built." Torrin replied, "Perhaps. But if it comes, it will find a city that knows how to rebuild, that has done it before and will do it again." They watched as the dragon swept low, the children's laughter rising to meet them, the city's heart steady as the river's tide. Years passed. Rhaella and Torhen grew gray and wise, and new faces filled the council chamber. Some years were hard, others gentle, but never again did the bells ring for sack or for surrender, only for weddings, births, festivals, and peace. The wheel turned, and with each passing, the ruts it carved grew less deep, the road smoother. Old John was the last of that first council to pass. He died quietly in his sleep. A dragon perched outside his window. The city hushed in mourning. Myra Stark spoke his eulogy. "He gave us the North's quiet, the wolf's loyalty, and the fire's warmth." The bells rang all day for him, and the smallest children placed stones on his grave, as was the custom for the friend of all. The city endured. When Rhaella's time came, she lay beneath the heart tree beside her mother, the roots deeper and the branches wide, the dragon silent overhead. Torren, old and tired, left the city soon after, riding north to spend his last years where the snow never fully melted, his name remembered as a just and gentle hand. In the years beyond, new rulers rose, some born of dragon's blood, some of wolf, some of none at all. The council became the true power, guided by the memory of the queen who chose mercy, the king who chose patience, and the friends who had shown them the value of gentleness in a world built on strength. No song sang of sack or fire, but in every home, in every market, children learned of the time when dragons saved the city by not burning, when a queen knelt to plant a garden where ashes had blown. The dragon's wings shadowed the city still, but their flight was a sign not of doom but of guardianship. And so, in the long memory of the city by the river, the bells rang in joy, in hope, in the sweet ache of peace. The city endured. The people endured. The promise endured, as bright and fragile as glass, as fierce and gentle as the dragon queen who saved them all. In K.I.E. Decades stretched quietly across the land, their passage marked not by banners trampled underfoot, nor by the thunder of armies along the roads, but by the soft progress of seasons, the patient knitting of peace. King's Landing grew and changed, stone by stone, as if memory itself was being rewritten with each new dawn. The river thickened with trade boats, children played in streets once haunted by famine, and laughter became as common as bells. The heart tree's roots grew massive and tangled beneath the earth, its canopy shading the entire plaza, a living roof beneath which the city gathered for every festival, vigil, and council. In the second generation since Daenerys, the council's charter had become more than law. It was habit, an invisible skeleton holding the kingdom upright. Faces came and went. Merchants from the Jade Sea, olive-skinned emissaries from the Summer Isles, dwarves from the far north whose skill with stone outmatched even the old masons of old. The council chamber became a chorus. Accents, tempers, wisdoms all clashing and blending. The discord sometimes loud but never sharp enough to draw blood. Rhaella's heir, a girl named Meleys, grew in this world of compromise and careful ambition. Her eyes were gray like her father Torrhen's, but her spirit bore the restlessness of her Targaryen ancestors. She learned her letters at the feet of old Myra Stark, now white-haired and stately, and her sums from the Master of Coin's youngest apprentice, a child with a stammer who outpaced his tutors before he was 10. She trained with the City Watch, learned to ride dragons under the eye of Elisa's granddaughter, and spent every winter's night reading in the city's high tower, wrapped in furs and blankets, devouring tales of the free cities and the vanished civilizations across the sea. Meleys' coming of age was marked by a crisis unlike any before it. In her 16th year, the seas rose in a series of strange, moon-dragged tides. Whole villages along the Blackwater vanished beneath brine, and trade from the Arbor and the Shield Islands became treacherous. The maesters of the Citadel, still housed in a new, broad campus at the city's western edge, studied sky and sea, poring over scrolls in a panic. It was Meleys, slipping from her lessons, who listened to the dockhands and ferrymen, gathering stories of shifting currents and strange, glowing creatures in the water. She summoned the council herself, demanded the construction of breakwaters, the reinforcement of docks with new glass stone, and the temporary evacuation of the lower wards. When the great storm finally arrived, the city was ready. The dragons flew night patrols, lighting bonfires along the hills to guide those lost in the flood. The council worked side by side with commoners to clear wreckage, rescue the stranded, ration grain. No one died for lack of care. In the aftermath, Meleys led the efforts to restore the drowned markets, raising taxes on her own estate to fund rebuilding. The people cheered her, not for her blood, but for her resolve, and her presence at every disaster's edge. In her, the legacy of mercy found new shape, not soft but unflinching, a mercy that rebuilt as fiercely as it defended. Meleys' reign saw the spread of knowledge as the city's greatest export. The university at King's Landing, once a dream of Daenerys' council, now a vast sprawl of towers, gardens, and open-air forums, drew scholars from across the world. Glass tablets, enchanted to never fade, recorded histories, laws, and poems. The university's astronomers charted the movement of comets and new stars, sending missives by raven as far as Korth and Ashai. Meleys herself presided over the council, listening with the same patience and care that had marked her forebears. Old tensions never vanished entirely. In the western hills, a few lords clung to dreams of crowns and isolation. Once, in the depth of winter, they barricaded roads and sent word that King's Landing should kneel to their old laws. Meleys sent no armies. Instead, she traveled to them with only 2 dragons and a handful of guards, and spent 3 days and nights in their great hall, eating their bread, listening to their complaints, and then offering a simple promise. The roads would reopen, grain and salt would flow, so long as the banners of peace were raised. By the time she left, the lords themselves accompanied her, their banners flying side by side with the dragons, their oaths given in council and not under threat. It was under Meleys that the old boundaries softened. The city became a gathering of peoples. Summer islanders built domed halls at the harbor. Tyroshi dyers painted banners for every public festival. Sarnori horsemen taught their craft in the royal mews. Each year, on the anniversary of Daenerys' death, a festival was held beneath the Heart Tree, where the stories of the city were told anew, not by bards, but by the people themselves, tanners and glassworkers, bakers and sailors, children of every color and language, standing before the roots to recite what peace had given them. Some called it the Queen's Vigil, some simply the Promise. As age came upon her, Meleys watched her city transform again. The dragons, once symbols of conquest and fear, had become guardians of the realm's order. Their flight over the city no longer cast dread, but instead marked festival days and times of need. The youngest children learned their names as easily as they learned the words for bread and river. One winter, Meleys walked the city's oldest wall with the latest master of laws, a plump, quick-witted woman who had once been a pot girl in the dragon pit. They looked down at the lights flickering along the river, at the domes and steeples and banners, at the heart tree's spreading shadow. The master of laws asked, "Do you think the world will ever need fire again?" Meleys answered, "The world will always need fire, but not to burn. To warm, to cook, to light our way, to destroy only what cannot be healed." She leaned on the wall, feeling the city's pulse. "We guard the fire now, not with fear, but with care." That spring, a new clutch of dragons hatched, 5 in all, each with wings marked by streaks of gold and emerald. Children named them for the flowers blooming in the city gardens: rose, hyacinth, poppy, foxglove, and nightshade. The dragons grew quickly, learning to fish in the river, to bask on the high towers, to let themselves be led through the city on festival days, docile and gentle beneath garlands. It was then that travelers from beyond the narrow sea arrived, men and women in dark blue robes, their eyes marked by tattoos of tiny stars. They claimed to be the descendants of those who once fled the Shadowlands, come in peace to study the city that had weathered both fire and storm. The council welcomed them, and soon the university swelled with the new knowledge they brought: medicines for the old fevers, ways to purify water, spells to protect crops from blight. Some among the city's old guard feared this magic, but Melis reminded them, as her grandmother had reminded her, that fear closed more doors than it kept. In Melis's last years, she made one final journey, riding Dragonback north to the Wall. The wildlings, now farmers and builders, greeted her as kin. The Wall itself, long abandoned as a fortification, had become a monument. Travelers carved names in its stones, left offerings, sang old songs. She planted a sprig from the heart tree in a hollow at its base, where it took root and grew. Her return to the city was marked by celebration. Bonfires along the river, a parade of boats hung with lanterns, the council chamber hung with banners from every part of the world. In the heart tree's shadow, Melis knelt before the council and placed her signet ring, a plain band of glass and steel, on the table. She called for a vote, and the council, by acclamation, elected the next chair, a stonemason's daughter from the islands, known for her wisdom and humor. The people cheered, for power now belonged not to blood, but to the will and memory of all. Melis lived to see her great-grandchildren playing in the city's gardens, watched over by dragons, gentle as cats, listened to music from 100 lands. On her last morning, as the bells tolled, she sat beneath the heart tree, hands folded in her lap, and closed her eyes as the sun rose, her heart quiet, her work done. After her, the city went on. The council continued, faces changing, laws evolving, the heart tree growing larger each year. In time, the city's story spread across the world, not of sack or flame, but of the stubborn, patient victory of mercy and wisdom. In distant lands, when parents told children of dragons, they spoke not of destruction, but of the queen who chose to save, and the city that remembered what it was to build and to love. Generations unspooled. The city grew into legend, but the bells still rang. For births and for weddings, for festivals and for peace, for the start and end of every council, and for the memory of the first queen who taught them all that fire need not consume, that mercy could last, that the future belonged not to conquerors, but to those who rebuilt the world, one quiet morning at a time. Ah, ah. Children grew up in King's Landing, not knowing what war sounded like. They learned the rhythms of peace. The clangor of the smithy at dawn, the music of market sellers, the laughter of apprentices, the soft hush of stories told beneath the ancient heart tree. The roots of that tree reached ever further, burrowing beneath cobbled squares and elegant halls, holding the city together like the threads of memory. Old folk traced the trunk's knots and taught the youngest to listen, not just with ears, but with hearts. This was a city that had survived itself over and over, and every new child was told, "It is your turn to tend what you inherit." Melis' passing marked the end of dragon blood rule in practice, but not in spirit. Her final council, now a gathering as large as any of the city's old tourneys, voted unanimously to continue governance by merit and service, not birthright. The stonemason's daughter, Lady Sorel of the Islands, was sworn as chair, her oath given in the languages of all 7 kingdoms, and 2 beyond. She presided with humility and wit. A city held by fear will rot from the core, she told them. A city held by love and diligence will outlast empires. The council's power waxed and waned, but it was never overthrown. The records show faces of every shape and color, riverfolk with tangled hair, shaven-headed traders from Volantis, Septon's sons, bakers' daughters, wildlings' grandsons, and a quiet, pale-eyed boy who arrived on a trading galley from the Shadowlands, carrying only a battered violin and a voice that could still a festival crowd. Each brought a new thread to the tapestry, and the council itself became a living memory of the realm's promises and scars. The dragons endured. By now, 5 generations had come and gone since Daenerys had first chosen mercy at King's Landing's gates, and the line of her dragons was unbroken, though the creatures themselves grew smaller, gentler, more accustomed to the nearness of people. More accustomed to the nearness of people. It was not unusual for a child to grow up riding atop the oldest dragon in the Mews, holding fast to a heavy leather harness as their parents watched and called advice. The city learned the old Valyrian words for trust and gentleness, and the dragons responded to voice and laughter, seldom to whips or spurs. In the 2nd century after Daenerys, a new crisis swept in, not war, but forgetting. The oldest records faded, and songs from the old tongue slipped into the recesses of memory. Many feared the city would lose its story, that the meaning of mercy and the lessons of restraint would be diluted by comfort. But the council, under Lady Sorel's great-grandson, decreed the construction of the Hall of Remembrance, a library, a stage, and a gallery. Every citizen, upon coming of age, was invited to contribute a story, a drawing, a memory, or a song. Some left tales of their first dragon ride, others drawings of the city in fog, some only a pebble marked with their name and a date. A festival called the Ringing Day was born. Every year, on the anniversary of the bells that once called surrender, but now marked peace, the city gathered under the heart tree. Children rang handbells, each tone a promise. Elders retold the story. The city's fire averted, the council's founding, the first true spring after famine. The dragons circled above, their shadows dappling the crowd. Lanterns drifted downriver at sunset, each carrying a wish or a remembrance for someone lost, or for someone yet to come. The city weathered famine, flood, and plague, but never again did it weather war. Disputes were settled in courts and in open council. When ships from far Korth or the Summer Islands arrived with wild stories of distant kings and their conquests, the children of kings landing listened politely, but their questions were always practical. What crops grow in your soil? What games do your children play? Do you know any new songs? The merchants from afar left marveling that a city so ancient, so powerful, prized not its armies, but its orchards and its music. In the distant north, the wall had vanished in 1,000 years of slow collapse, and the land was green again, thick with birch and pine. From time to time, bands of travelers made their way south, bringing new crops, new dialects, new jokes. The city's gates were always open, and the markets swelled with faces never seen before. It was in this time that a quiet threat crept in. The lure of forgetting, of growing complacent, of taking for granted the safety and plenty won by so many generations. The council commissioned a new tradition, one that would not allow the memory of fire and ashes to fade. Every 5 years, the youngest in the city were chosen to sweep the dragon pit clean, to repaint the murals showing the sack, the fires, and the day Daenerys turned away from destruction. On that day, no music played, no bells rang. The city grew silent. Bread was broken, water and wine shared. But no one feasted or danced. In the evening, as dusk gathered, an old woman, sometimes a counselor, sometimes a humble sweeper, would rise and recite the oath of peace, a litany in all the city's tongues. We tend what we inherit, we honor what we were spared, we give more than we take, we hold to mercy and to hope. That night, the dragons flew higher than usual, lanterns tied to their harnesses glowing like stars above the city. The oldest among the people would remind the children, "You are safer now because once, a queen made a different choice." Outside the city, new towns and villages had blossomed along the old roads. Peace made travel easy, and the need for old walls had faded. Every generation, the council's chosen representatives journeyed from the furthest corners of the realm to take their seats at King's Landing, arriving on foot, by river barge, or astride small, bright dragons bred for endurance and gentleness. The council became a living parliament, its chambers lined with tokens of 100 cultures. Wind chimes from the Isles, bone carvings from the north, silks from the summer sea, little bells and tapestries from every hamlet. The land itself changed too. The fields around the city grew wild in some places, set aside for the return of wolves and deer. Orchardists bred apples so sweet that travelers wrote ballads about them. Irrigation from the Blackwater was managed by learned engineers, their methods shared freely with anyone who came to learn. The memory of hunger was kept alive only in story, so that plenty would not make the city thoughtless or unkind. With peace came a flowering of the arts. King's Landing became a city of music and stories, its taverns filled with playwrights and philosophers, its squares alive with dancers, jugglers, and traveling singers. The greatest of these was a troupe called the Bellkeepers, whose performances, half drama, half ritual, retold the story of the city's salvation every autumn. Audiences came from every kingdom to watch, and it was said that no one, however proud or hardened, could see the final act without weeping. In the 3rd century after Daenerys, the council welcomed a new chair, a woman known only as Sparrow, born in Flea Bottom, raised among the city's poorest, who rose through the ranks of the scribes and was chosen for her wisdom and her gentle hand. Her first act as chair was to lower the steps to the council chamber and widen the doors, so that anyone, however frail or bold, could enter and be heard. The city celebrated its 400th ringing day beneath banners of every color, under the watchful eyes of a dozen dragons and 100 glass lanterns. 1,000 children recited the oath of peace, and the oldest survivor of Daenerys' line, a woman nearly 90, stood to say, "Let this be our story, not just the wheel broken, but the path rebuilt, not just the fire averted, but the warmth preserved." As the seasons turned, so did the city, always growing, always listening, always remembering. There were still quarrels, still bitter winters and lean summers, still the need for courage and for kindness. But no more did war scorch the land, and never again did fear drive the council's hand. At night, from the city walls, the stars glittered above the black water, and the dragons traced lazy arcs across the moon. Children born in this age sometimes dreamed of fire, but always awoke in the safety of their beds, to the gentle hush of peace, to the certainty that mercy, once chosen, could be chosen again, and again for as long as there were hearts to remember. And in every story told beneath the heart tree, in every song on ringing day, Daenerys' name endured, carried not as a weapon, but as a promise, that even the greatest power may be gentled, that a city may become its own safeguard, that dragons may learn to guard, not burn, and that in the end, the truest victory is simply to endure and to be kind. Years passed, then centuries, until the day came when the city itself was older than any stone in the Red Keep's oldest cellars, and the oldest dragon in the Mews blinked cloudy golden eyes at the ringing of dawn bells. King's Landing no longer feared sack or siege. It had outgrown the nightmares of fire and steel, weathered the long quiet. Even memory, once sharp as a sword's edge, softened until the stories were a comfort, not a warning. And yet, under the heart tree's boughs, every new child was told, this peace was paid for and must be earned anew with every generation. The council, now more an assembly of the whole city than a gathering of great lords, had swelled until its meetings filled not a single chamber, but a network of domed halls that radiated from the plaza like spokes. The Hall of Bells, the oldest, held the greatest weight, a ring-shaped colonnade beneath the roots of the heart tree, where sunlight fell through colored glass at all hours. Here, every trade and craft had its place. Sailors, healers, scribes, glassblowers, poets, farmers, dragon tamers, and the children who swept the streets or sang in the courts. The council's voice was not always harmonious. Indeed, there were days when the shouting rose so high that the dragons themselves stirred and craned their necks in puzzlement. But disputes were met with argument, not steel, and compromise became the city's most honored art. Dragons remained the city's guardians and its mystery. The great bloodlines bred over centuries, the bold copper scales of the storm drakes, the gentle, wide-eyed river wings, the massive, slow-moving heartfires. No longer beasts of war, they were partners in every great work, hauling stones for new bridges, breathing gentle fire over frost-bitten orchards, flying with children on festival days in the careful supervision of riders trained not for conquest, but for stewardship. The art of dragon lore flourished in the city's schools. Each child learned to read and write, to count and measure, but also to speak a little High Valyrian and to understand the dragon's moods and ways. New books were written every decade. The wisdom of Dragonflame, the history of the city's rebuilding, the code of mercy. Scribes engraved the oath of peace in glass and stone in every market and crossroads. On the 500th ringing day, the city gathered as always beneath the heart tree. Its roots by now a tangled maze, its canopy spreading wide enough to shelter an entire crowd from rain. Bells were rung not only by the council, but by every citizen, each with their own small handbell, from the oldest crone to the youngest babe. The sound was a living thing, bright and harmonious, echoing down to the river, and up to the heights where the dragons perched, scales glimmering with oil and rain. That year, the story was told not by a chair of the council, nor by a bard, but by a baker's daughter, chosen by lottery as every citizen was. She spoke with a tremble in her voice at first, but steadied as she recited how once the city had trembled on the edge of annihilation and was saved not by might, but by a queen's decision to spare, to build, to listen. She spoke of Daenerys, now less a legend than a guiding star, and of those who had come after: counselors, dragon riders, healers, builders, peacemakers. She ended with the oath, and 1,000 voices took up the words, swelling to fill the plaza. We tend what we inherit. We honor what we were spared. We give more than we take. We hold to mercy and to hope. The baker's daughter's voice rang for a moment after the words faded, and then the bells began their chorus once more. In the years that followed, the city endured both hardship and delight. Once, a summer drought lasted so long the river shrank to a trickle and the orchards yellowed. The dragons took turns ferrying water from the hills, and the council rationed stores, but the people endured, and when the rains finally came, the city held a festival of fountains, children running barefoot in the clean, cold water. Another time, a sickness swept in from across the sea, and the healers and scholars, aided by Firestone and the latest in alchemic wisdom, devised cures and quarantines. Losses came, as they always did, but never by neglect, never by fear. The council recorded every lesson learned, every mistake and every triumph, so that the city's knowledge grew richer with every trial. The dragons themselves changed, their songs blending into the city's soundscape. Every new clutch was greeted as a public joy, and the naming of hatchlings became a day of games, pageants, and feasts. No two dragons looked the same. Some bore brilliant purple or gold, others glimmered silver blue in the morning light. The people said that each dragon carried the memory of every mercy, every rebuilding, every act of gentleness woven into their blood. With time, the city's festival of stories drew people from the whole world. Traders came from Yiti and Leng, from the jungles of Sithorios, from the far north where the Night's Watch, now a fraternity of scholars and engineers, taught new ways of farming and harnessing the wind. The council welcomed every voice, every idea, every new hope. On a day in the 600th year after Daenerys, a stranger arrived. An old woman, walking with a crooked staff, eyes clear and knowing. She asked to speak in the Hall of Bells, and by custom was granted the floor. She told the council and the gathered crowd that in her youth, her city far to the east had been consumed by war, its gardens burned, its rivers poisoned. She had heard stories of a place where the wheel was not merely broken, but where no hand need turn it against another. She had walked a continent to see if such a place was real. When she finished, she fell silent. The council let her rest, then brought her bread and wine and offered her a place to stay, as they did for every traveler. That evening, she was seen in the plaza beneath the heart tree, singing a song in a language no one knew, but that carried in it the yearning of every home lost and every hope renewed. The children of that era knew little of conquest or pride, but much of care. They played games in the great halls and on the green lawns, their laughter echoed by the dragons flying overhead. Their schools were open to all, their teachers drawn from every corner of the earth. The council heard their voices too, on every question of governance. Youth delegates, their sashes marked with bells, their words as weighty as any lord's. Some centuries on, it became the custom for every new chair of the council to spend a night alone in the dragon pit before taking office, to listen to the stillness, to remember the ashes and the fire that was never kindled. They left a single white stone on the altar, a mark of humility and remembrance. And so, the city continued. Its stones weathered wind and rain, its heart tree thickened, its bells rang out every year. Dragons kept their watch, their numbers sometimes waxing, sometimes waning, but their presence a living reminder that strength, once gentled, could become something greater than power. King's Landing at last was a city in full, no longer haunted by what it had survived, but alive with what it had become. The memory of Daenerys was not only in statues or stories, but in the daily acts of kindness, the patient labor of builders, the songs sung under the tree, and the quiet peace that needed no conquest to maintain. The world changed, as it always did, but the city endured, and its people endured, and with each new dawn, as bells rang and dragons rose with the sun, the old promise was kept. That mercy, once chosen, could echo for 1,000 years. In the deep glow of centuries, King's Landing stood like a legend carved in living stone. Its skyline shifting as towers gave way to domes, its streets grown wide and shaded by orchards, whose roots ran as tangled as the city's history. The heart tree, now vast enough to shade half the square, was ringed by generations of names carved into the bark. Some letters faded, some bright, a living chronicle. On still nights, those who sat in its roots swore they heard echoes. Old songs, laughter, the distant chime of bells, and sometimes faint voices repeating the ancient oath: we tend what we inherit. We honor what we were spared. We give more than we take. We hold to mercy and to hope. The dragons, once the world's terror, then its wonder, had settled into myth made flesh. Their wings still rippled the sky above festival crowds. Their great eyes watched from rooftops and gardens. Their warmth cured sickness and grew orchards where frost might have bitten. People swore by the dragons as they did by the sun or the tide. As sure as the river wing glides over the black water, or as steadfast as hearth fires watch. Their presence was comfort, their fire a hearth, their patience a model for those who led. Each ringing day, the festival's heart was the recitation of the city's story. Not by a single voice, but by 1,000. Children, apprentices, old ones, newly arrived strangers. Each stood in turn beneath the heart tree and shared a memory, a hope, or a lesson. Some years the stories were small. A recipe for honey cakes, a trick to coax vines to bloom on north-facing walls, the best place to watch the sunrise. Other years brought sorrow. The passing of a beloved dragon, a drought that left fields brown, or the quiet grief of another voice lost to time. The festival always ended with the lighting of lanterns. First beneath the tree, then across the city, and on boats drifting out to sea, each bearing a wish for the future. Once every decade, the council gathered in the Hall of Bells for the weighing. A tradition begun after the last dragon-blooded queen stepped aside. Here, every guild, borough, and district sent representatives, joined by delegates from distant cities and lands beyond the narrow sea. For 10 days, the council reviewed the city's deeds. What had been built or repaired, how well the poor were housed and fed, the wisdom or folly of new laws, the health of the river, the balance of trade, and the care of dragons and trees alike. The weighing was not always gentle. Disagreements flared, old wounds surfaced. More than once, voices broke with anger or grief. But each day ended in the dragon pit, now an amphitheater alive with debate and song, where every matter, no matter how bitter, was faced until it could be set down in good faith. The people believed this catharsis sacred, a ritual to air and tend the cracks beneath the city's brilliance. The university, grown now into a city within the city, became the world's center for learning and healing. Scholars studied old magics with new tools, inventing arts that harness dragonfire to mend broken bones, purify water, or power looms. Glass scribed with the wisdom of generations hung in every classroom. The Night's Watch, reborn as the Watchers of the Lights, maintained beacons along the wild coasts. And every year the council sent a contingent to help them tend the fires and share new tales. Peace, so long the city's greatest treasure, was guarded not by fear but by habit. Arguments were fierce, sometimes about whether the river needed dredging, or which festival to honor next, or if a new market should be built on the city's edge. Yet no dispute turned to violence. The people had learned, slowly, and at great cost, that the wheel of history could be turned by patience as well as by fire. Other cities sent envoys to learn these ways. It was not unusual, by the 7th century after Daenerys, to see Qartheen in bright veils, Sarnori with braids like river reeds, Summer Islanders with gold rings and quick laughter, Yiddish scholars, even rare travelers from the islands Arya Stark once mapped. Some came to stay, marrying into local families, starting new crafts, or teaching forgotten arts. In every ringing day, their customs joined the celebration. New dances, strange sweets, the soft music of flutes and zithers, and the haunting, hollow singing of far Sotharios. With so many threads, the city grew rich, not only in coin, but in memory. The Hall of Remembrance expanded, its galleries stretching through old tunnels and up into sunlight. At its heart, a single alcove preserved Daenerys' words, carved in glass so clear it seemed made of air. Mercy is not weakness. Mercy is the choice to build when it would be easier to destroy. Peace, once won, must be tended like a garden. Some worried in quieter times that this long peace would dull the city's edge, but each generation proved otherwise. When floods rose, it was the children who carried sandbags. When a rare fire struck the glassblower's market, it was a counselor's apprentice who organized the bucket lines. And when, once in an age, strangers tried to test the city's resolve, seeking to exploit the trust that had grown, King's Landing answered with united patience and shrewd open arms, never closing its gates but never mistaking kindness for naivete. Dragons too played their part. The old records told of a day when the last of the great river wings grew ill, and all the city gathered in the Hall of Bells, each citizen laying a green leaf or a painted stone as an offering. When the dragon passed, the council declared a week of silence. No bells, no music, only the sound of wind and water and work. In mourning, the city was united. The next year, the dragon's brood hatched in the new gardens, and the children who tended them were honored for decades. The city's love of story became its shield. Every citizen, upon coming of age, was expected to add a new tale to the Hall of Remembrance, not just their family's triumphs, but their doubts, their mistakes, the way the city had shaped and changed them. The council studied these records as closely as they did tax ledgers or trade logs. More than once, a citywide project was begun because a single child's story moved the assembly to action. Over the centuries, a few changes were inevitable. The river, once wild, was channeled in new courses. Some districts vanished under orchards or glashhouses. Others sprang up on land, won from the sea. The lineages of dragons shifted, their colors and shapes changing with each new clutch. The council itself experimented, sometimes electing co-chairs, sometimes rotating by season or by craft. Yet, through every alteration, the oath of peace remained, recited at the start of every gathering, written on every contract, and in every schoolroom. It was in the city's 1000th year, beneath a full moon on ringing day, that a child, a baker's son named Tolan, asked a question that rippled through the crowd. He had listened to the stories of peace and dragons, of councils and kindness. And when it was his turn, he asked, "Will we ever need fire again? Or will the world change so much that even dragons must learn to become something else?" No one answered at once. The council, now a living sea of faces, let the question hang. It was the oldest dragon in the mews, its muzzle gray, eyes ancient and wise, that rumbled softly, unfurling its wings and sending a warm gust through the plaza. The bells stilled. The city held its breath. Finally, the chair, a gentle-voiced healer from the riverward, spoke. "We will always need fire," she said, "but we may need it in ways we have not yet imagined. Fire to forge, to warm, to guide. Fire to remind us that what we build can be lost if we do not tend it. And when the world asks something new of us, may we be as brave as those who chose mercy, and as wise as those who remember the cost." 9. That night, as lanterns drifted out on the river and the dragons wheeled over the city, Tolan's question became the theme of the next year's ringing day. Children wrote songs about new kinds of fire, curiosity, courage, the light of learning. Elders composed poems about the dragon's patience, and artists painted murals showing not just the old legends, but dreams for what the city might yet become. And so, as seasons and centuries passed, King's Landing endured, not through walls or swords, but by the memory of mercy and the unbroken promise that the city would always seek to build, not burn, for as long as bells could ring and stories could be told beneath the sheltering branches of the heart tree.